Chapter 850. Samuel's corpse flame was a strange flame. This flame was born from energy and needed corpse chi to support it. Samuel had refined it over the years, and he had mixed several strong corpse poisons into it, letting it corrode a living being's body and vitality, turning a living person into a corpse. Although the power of the flame was nothing to write home about, the additional effects were enough to make people tremble in fear. Even if it was an expert with a higher cultivation base than Samuel, they wouldn't dare let themselves be covered in this flame. Not to mention a person with a lower cultivation base and not using any defensive cultivation techniques. Why was he not injured at all? Chu Tian was standing in the middle of the flame, and there was not a single hair on his body that was affected. This was a bit unbelievable and incomprehensible. Samuel shot out several more fireballs. Shwa shwa. Several fireballs hit Chu Tian's body. This time people could clearly see that the fireballs passed through Chu Tian's body, but strangely they did not touch Chu Tian. It was like they did not pass through his body, but rather air. Since they couldn't even touch him, what could these strange and sinister flames do to him? Camouflage? Spiritual illusion technique? No, he didn't feel any spiritual energy fluctuations. Samuel did not believe it. His body was covered in a ghostly aura as he raised his hands high up. His 10 skinny fingers released flames at the same time, condensing a large fireball above his head in a short period of time. This fireball was quickly compressed, turning from a dark green to a jet black color. The attack power was at least 10 times stronger than before. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. The reason he could easily deal with the previous attack was because the flames were too weak. This attack was close to Samuel's third awakened soul layer strength, and Chu Tian's void escaping technique could not resist this kind of strong energy. So once he was hit, he would lose his effect. You think you can be arrogant just because you know a little strange cultivation technique? Samuel caught Chu Tian's expression. He knew that Chu Tian could not dodge this attack, so he revealed a cold and fiendish smile. How will you block this move? Go die. The black fireball roared out as it charged over. Chu Tian did not dodge. His skin and his body suddenly lit up with starlight. The light was so strong that he turned into a person made of light. He opened his arms like he was hugging a friend, casually hugging it. He's seeking death. How could Samuel's corpse flame be touched by a mortal? The necromancers revealed an expression like they were looking at a fool, and the gnomes revealed looks of shock. Could it be that the human didn't feel that the fatal part of the flame was not the flame itself, but rather the poison and curse inside? What was the difference between charging in like this and a moth flying into a flame? Puchi, the sound of fire and water colliding. The fireball in Chu Tian's chest continued to shrink. The sinister corpse chi and corpse poison energy could not pass through the light on his body to harm Chu Tian at all. Rather, it was completely blocked outside and was finally destroyed by the power of the sacred light. Everyone was shocked once again. He was still unharmed. How did this human do this? There weren't many people in Green City that could calmly block Samuel's attack. Actually, this was one of the effects of the sacred light body. Not only did the sacred light body have a strong defense, it also had a strong resistance to this kind of dark death energy. It could even be said that it completely countered it. Samuel finally understood. The people sent by the Eternal Forest were not ordinary people. This kind of defensive ability could make him an outstanding talent in Green City. If he wasn't careful in dealing with this kind of opponent, perhaps there would be endless troubles. Chu Tian raised his sword and turned into a burning sword chi that swept out. Large amounts of dark gray energy came out of Samuel's cloak. It was like several hundred wandering spirits surrounded his body, forming a layer of defense. Chu Tian's sword chi hit it, but it could not harm Samuel at all. You're only SOSO. When Samuel's voice was halfway through, Chu Tian suddenly turned into a blur and disappeared. This speed was so fast that even Samuel, who was in the rank 3 true spirit, could not react to it. In an instant, more than 10 extremely fast sword lights passed through Samuel's body like threads. One after another beautiful sword lights shot out. The Een souls that were protecting his body were instantly scattered, and a large portion of them were evaporated by the netherworld flame's power. Samuel was completely enraged. "Great nether god, please open the gates of hell and release the power of the dead into the world." A large amount of ink like black fog appeared around the necromancer priest. This spirit energy condensed into a fierce skeleton image. This was the necromancer's source spirit. When the incomparably strong death aura spread out, it was like a drop of ink on a piece of paper. Wherever it spread, it would be coated in a layer of black. The green grass around him turned into black obsidian before shattering like fragile glass. Chu Tian quickly dodged. With this kind of attack, even he did not dare take it head-on. The spirit energy aura released by his source spirit. There was no life within 15 meters of Samuel. Countless strands of energy floated in the air, and with Samuel chanting an incantation, they all condensed back into a solid form. 10,000 ghosts seeking life. Samuel's elemental energy transformed into thousands of skulls. There were ghostly wails and wolf howls coming from all directions. This was a spiritual attack that made the gnomes' expressions change as they moved back even further. These skulls had fierce expressions and their hair was disheveled. Once they were summoned, they immediately locked onto Chu Tian. They were like sharks smelling blood, charging forward to suck his flesh and blood dry. They were not illusions. Each skull was a weapon refined by the necromancer's vengeful spirits. They were monsters that had form but no substance, so even if they were broken by normal methods, there would be no effect at all. They would reform in a few seconds, so it would just be a waste of energy. Once the skull fell on a person's body, the consequences would be unimaginable. These vengeful spirits would enter the target's body and use the curse and death energy to corrode the body. They would corrode the mind and soul, finally draining the flesh and soul. This was a very high-level move of the necromancers. This move was not over yet. The second move was released. Samuel controlled the thick ghosts and black fog around him and quickly condensed them on the surface of his body. Finally, it formed a set of sturdy and ferocious armor. Samuel's original appearance could no longer be seen. He had almost turned into a skeleton general with a height of nearly 3 meters and 2 black bone spears in his hands. His body was covered in runes. The 2 black bone spears were filled with a strong death aura. Every movement he made stirred up a storm of ghosts. That bone-chilling cold that seemed like it could freeze a person's soul, it was enough to make it hard for people to breathe, not to mention moving or resisting. "I want to see what you'll use to fight me." Samuel's voice became wild and terrifying, just like several hundred hoarse voices overlapping together. It was like a ghost coming for their lives, making people tremble in fear. Then the black demon god's sword soared into the sky. Chu Tian did not hide his strength anymore. He released his source spirit and a wild destructive energy filled the surroundings, instantly shattering all the skulls near him. This was not just shattering them, it was also destroying their roots, making it impossible for them to heal. No matter how many skulls hit it, they were shattered by the demon god's sword 3 feet away. Chu Tian's figure paused, and the raging flames on the blade spread to his body. In an instant, they covered Chu Tian's entire body, making him look like a flaming demon. A skeleton general, a flame demon. Both sides charged at each other at the same time. Everyone could clearly feel that Chu Tian had fused with the weapon spirit and fused with the weapon, instantly increasing his strength by several times, completely overshadowing Samuel. A sword glow soared into the sky. The 2 spears of death were cleanly cut into pieces. The sword beam still maintained its power and bombarded Samuel's body. The skeleton armor formed by ghosts and death energy completely exploded, and Samuel's body was thrown high into the air. One attack. Chu Tian only used one attack. Clean and direct, without any tricks, he used a single attack to crush Samuel. Chu Tian's figure flickered, and his flame body split into 8, shooting out like meteors. They were evenly distributed in 8 directions around Samuel, and the sword glows in each figure's hands became incomparably dazzling, condensing a terrifying power. "No, you can't kill me," Samuel angrily roared as he struggled. "Otherwise, tens of thousands of people will be buried with you." Clark's expression also changed. He didn't have a way to save his clansmen yet. If he killed this fellow now, it would be impossible to stop. He did not have a chance to stop him at all. Chu Tian was too fast, and the 8 figures moved at the same time, all using the netherworld flickering flame slash. Each figure sent out at least 30 sword glows. In half a blink of an eye, the 8 figures had unleashed more than 200 sword lights. The entire field of vision was filled with a storm of blue sword glows. It was like a beautiful explosion of fireworks blooming in the sky. Under the cover of the sword glows, everyone's eyes opened. The momentum of this attack was very strong. In the center of this incomparable storm of sword chi, anything would be instantly turned to dust before being swallowed by the raging netherworld flames, not even leaving a bit of residue. The sword glows disappeared as quickly as they appeared. It was like a flash in the pan, stunning people and making them feel pity. When the storm of sword glows disappeared from the sky, Chu Tian slowly fell to the ground, and the flames slowly disappeared from his body. He spat out in disdain. "You want to kill me with this little bit of skill? I think the necromancer priest's methods are only so." The entire scene was filled with a deathly silence. The gnomes were all stunned. Who said this human was weak? He was clearly strong enough to make people's hair stand on end. A human that wasn't even 20 years old had the greatest potential. If he was given another 30-50 years, what kind of level would he grow to? You killed Samuel." The other necromancers reacted after a few seconds. Anger, shock, and fear filled their hearts at the same time. "Not only did I kill him, I also want to kill you all." Chu Tian charged at the necromancers with a sword glowing behind him. One person with a sword charged at several hundred necromancers. Chapter 851. The First Order was announced. Green City was filled with another stir. This method of cutting off most of the basic income. This was a hard-to-understand matter in any city. Not to mention that Green City was already in a bad situation, and now they were cutting off the income from the merchants. How would the city survive? Clark quickly came to find Chu Tian to ask. Chu Tian did not explain his actions. Rather, he arrogantly said, "You have to look further. Green City's population is already small enough. What can this bit of tax be used for? It would be better to make the city the first tax-free city in the Forest of Chaos and raise its popularity first. You can be assured that the gnomes' welfare and regular expenses, even if I pay out of my own pocket, I won't give you a single source stone." This person had a lot of money and was rich and overbearing. This made the gnomes feel confused. Could it be that this human had another power behind him? Otherwise, how could his expression not change in the face of such a large hole? Even if they could fill this large hole, this power was not simple. But seeing Chu Tian's solemn promise, although the gnomes were filled with doubt, they couldn't do anything to him. "Clark has come at the right time." Chu Tian said to him, "I'm prepared to visit the gnome research base and the construction of a city. I wonder if this is convenient." These could not be shown to outsiders. However, Chu Tian was now the acting city lord. If the acting city lord couldn't even understand the city situation, how could he manage the city? Clark discussed with the gnome elders for a few minutes. "Of course, there's no problem. Please come with us." The gnome research base had always been a secret and was also one of the most mysterious places in this area. Being able to stay by Chu Tian's side this time was also an opportunity for her to broaden her horizons. The gnomes introduced as they walked. The gnome research base was established at the same time as Green City and has a very long history. It is also the most complete research base in the forest. The Green Religion Temple, next to the mountain, was the entrance to the gnome research base. After walking through a path to the mountain, there were 4 elevators in front of them. Chu Tian and Dolores stood in the elevators, and the elevators immediately began to descend. There were transparent crystal stone windows all around them, and when they sat in the elevators, they could clearly feel that they were moving through different layers of rock. Very, very deep. After descending 500 meters, finally a giant underground world appeared in front of them. Dolores felt her masseter muscles go out of control as her chin fell down and her eyes popped out. She found it hard to believe that under Green City there was actually such a large underground cave. This was simply unimaginable. The gnomes explained, the Forest of Chaos geological structure is very special. Our ancestors studied the geology of the forest and were surprised to find that there were many underground caves under the Forest of Chaos. There were some deep underground worlds with large amounts of demons, dark elves, and other dark creatures. There were also some places that were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom, possibly hiding the secrets of the great ancient era. There wouldn't be demons under Green City, right? It's not that there isn't a possibility, but we haven't found anything yet. The elevator was about to reach its destination. When Chu Tian looked down from above, he could see gnome warehouses next to each other. On the straight tracks, there were actually trains parked there. Each train had a streamlined front, and there were several to 30 rectangular containers in the center. It was an underground train station. In front of them, there's a large number of palaces that appear in front of them. The size of the underground palace could hold several 100,000 people. The entire underground palace was made of metal and was filled with a modern style. There were many metal pipes here. The large ones were several meters thick and needed several people to wrap their arms around them. The small ones were only a few centimeters thick and weren't much thicker than a finger. It was very complicated and very dense. The entire research base was connected by these large and small pipes. There was more than one underground palace like this. Looking from afar, there were several underground palaces flickering with lights in the distance. Between these underground palaces was a bottomless dark abyss. The underground palaces were like lighthouses in the dark world. They were all connected to each other by floating railway tunnels or cable cars. Although the underground world was deep, it was not as dark or as silent as one would imagine. Other than the lighthouses and the underground palaces, the walls in all directions were covered in glowing crystals and all kinds of strange glowing plants. Dolores even saw a glowing mushroom. Its cap was at least 30 meters in diameter, and it was like a huge light bulb that illuminated a large area around it. Gurgling water flowed out of the cracks in the rocks, turning into a clear waterfall that fell into a bottomless abyss. There were some strange lizards and bats that were currently moving around on the walls. In this space that never saw the light of day, there was actually a strange ecosystem that made people sigh with admiration at the wonders of the Creator. This underground space is unfathomably deep, and we still haven't found out how deep it is. However, the underground world is very rich in resources, and the deeper one goes, the richer the resources are. Of course, the deeper one goes, the higher the chance of being attacked by dangerous creatures. Chu Tian looked into the bottomless abyss and fell into deep thought. Regarding the underground world of the Forest of Chaos, of course he had some understanding. This was a very complex place, especially in this era. It was unknown how many dangers were hidden here and how many treasures were hidden here. If he had a chance in the future, he would have to properly explore it. Of course, it was not the right time yet, and he did not have the strength to do so. Clark said in a proud voice, "The gnomes use an entire 200 years to create a complete transportation network." The gnomes' transportation system was made up of trains and cable cars. When they came out of the elevator, a station appeared in front of them. The train was made up of several carriages, and the structure was tight and stable. This was the gnomes' underground train. The gnomes have 7 underground research bases and have found over 100 precious resources. Clark said in a proud voice, "These underground railways are like blood vessels, connecting the gnomes' research bases, mines, farms, and production areas, forming an efficient production network. This is truly a complex and difficult project. Normal people might not be able to complete it." Dolores said to Clark, "How do these trains move? Come with me to the power room and you'll understand." Clark opened the power room of a train, and there was a honeycomb-shaped power room inside. Each power room was filled with red powder, and there was a source energy array carved on the surface of the power room. There were also large amounts of source stones embedded to activate the source energy array. The power source of the train is a stable fire-attributed crystal powder. This powder can release a strong flame and energy, which is finally absorbed by the source energy array, forming a complete power system that can easily push a several hundred-ton train forward. It can reach a maximum speed of 300 kilometers per hour. This made Chu Tian a bit shocked, although the gnome's technology did not enter his eyes. At the very least, it was considered quite advanced in this era. The cost of the flame crystal stones was not high. Using the energy of the crystal stones to move the train forward, it would greatly reduce the cost of running the train, but the source energy array would consume spirit energy. This source stone consumption would not be a small number. Clark explained, to maintain the basic operation of the transport network, it will consume at least 1,000 low-grade source stones every month. This was too damn wasteful. This was a completely unnecessary consumption. Miracle Commerce's source energy battery cost was low, and it could maintain the consumption of source energy. Chu Tian only needed to make a few simple modifications, and he could easily save a large amount of source stones. Now he invites Sir Acting City Lord to visit the gnome's research base. The gnome train rumbled as it slowly moved forward. The first place it went to was the underground palace in front of them. The entire underground palace was covered in train tracks, and they could clearly see the entire underground palace as they passed through the countless buildings. This is the fire energy research room. This is the water energy research room. This is the water of life synthesis room. This is... Chu Tian rode the gnome train through the gnome research base. He could be considered to have experienced just how grand the gnome's research base was. The gnomes loved to explore in nature. It was no wonder they could give away Green City so easily. This was because for the gnomes, as long as they had this underground research base and the corresponding funds, it would be enough. Why is this place this big? Dolores looked at the large round space in front of her and asked, "What's inside?" This is the Underground Creature Research Lab. Underground Creature. Clark opened the door to the research lab. Huge prison cells lined up in front of him. Inside each cell was a strange-looking creature. Dolores stared at the thing in the first cell. That fellow looked a bit strange. Its body was very evil and slender, only having a few tentacles to support it. However, its head was as big as a bucket, and a large eye was condensing a dazzling light. Suddenly, with a pung sound, Dolores was shocked. A beam of light shot out from this creature's eyes. If it wasn't for the gnome prison's barrier protecting them, this beam of light that could melt steel would have been impossible for Dolores to dodge. Dolores asked, "What kind of monster is this?" "You're too ignorant." Chu Tian did not wait for the gnomes to explain before saying, "This thing is called an evil eye, a very common underground creature. Its main ability is to use its eyes to shoot beams of light." Clark and the gnomes revealed looks of admiration to Chu Tian. This kind of creature is rarely seen on the surface. The acting city lord is truly knowledgeable. "Che, what's wrong with this?" Chu Tian curled his lips in disdain and immediately looked at the other creatures. He couldn't help admiring the gnomes, actually being able to raise this many dark creatures here. It was simply like a museum. He finally understood why the gnomes spent so much money on the research lab. The scale, equipment, and level of research were all at the top of the world. Spending several tens of thousands of low-grade source stones every month was already very frugal. Clark asked, "The gnomes do not have any hobbies other than searching for the truth. Although most of the gnomes' research cannot be turned into profit, this is the joy of the gnomes. So, if you really want to become the city lord, then this research lab." "You're thinking too much. You have to understand, I'm also a scholar." Chu Tian patted the gnome's shoulder. "This research lab is the true wealth of Green City. Those castles on the surface are not worth mentioning at all. Not only will I not close this research lab, I will also increase the resources, talents, and technology investment by 10 to 100 times, making this research lab even more glorious." Dolores on the side opened her mouth, but did not say anything. Chapter 852. Even if Samuel was not a peak expert of the undead religion, he could still be considered a top expert. This was a kind of cursed power with the gnome's great elder Clark personally making a move into stone. Even if he could win against Samuel, not affected he would still have to pay a bit of quickly pass through the light. The necromancer priest's swung his sword and cut down several necromancers, catching people off. The other necromancers no one dared to underestimate this group, and they quickly made a move. The acting city lord that the graveyard around the temple. This young human opened that was too zombies covered in stitches. He had actually directly killed. It was like there were springs in their entire fight suddenly shot out from the ground. He was at most stitched up puppets were all zombies skipping 2 levels and paying although their bodies were stiff to kill the third true spirit. They were filled with various poisons. This could not be described as a genius. Each of them this human shocking common sense and was a complete although they were not as agile and fierce as the gargoyles. The several thousand gnomes there were over 1,000 of them. The human sent by the elven ignored the dense amount of zombies in front of him. Although this kind of strength sword didn't count for much in the eternal forest, these are cultivators that controlled. He was at least in the top 10 in Green These terrifying, not to mention that he was still this young. He treated them like grass. He might not be inferior. There were several hundred necromancers in the eternal over 1,000 undead monsters. But they couldn't stop Chu Tian. People still had not recovered from their shock. Quickly kill him. Chu Tian the gargoyles released a purple and black energy, turning into a sword of glow that swept past several necromancers, roaring as they several bodies were cut apart by the sword glow. Without the gargoyles did not hit Chu Tian. Netherworld flame. Rather, they swallowed through Chu Tian's body and hit each other. The necromancer priest the 2 gargoyles out exploded flustered like and exasperated. The undead zombies spat out eyes turned white again. Wind blazed, space around him trembled. Poison arrows. He took a step forward and instantly disappeared. Kept dodging, moving to the center, escaping from the concentrated attacks. Spatial movement. The other attacks, all passed through his body like they were hitting air out. Not causing dozen necromancers were sent flying like broken butterflies void escaping technique burning on one hand, and his body the necromancer was covered in light by the church's elites. Even if the necromancers occasionally broke down through the void, escaping several necromancer with the sacred light quickly chanted an incantation, weakening motionless corrosions could not affect like statues on top of the temple. The various energy attacks could not cause one by damage to Chu Tian. They flapped their wings, kill, and suddenly rush again, advance again. With the gargoyles were puppets refined by the necromancers, forcefully carved similar to the shamans, and then he went back and forth and to kill them all over protectors. That aura was like a hot was not inferior to a ninth. Several necromancers that were not weak were cut down, and their bodies were engraved with death, including 2 necromancer priests. Even if the gargoyles had destroyed several dozen, they would still be had been cut down over 100. 300 gargoyles was not injured, and they instantly formed. Not to mention the terrifying battle. The gnomes were shocked. The 300 gargoyles opened their wings. They had never seen a person that could calmly move that instantly covered a large area. Everything that was covered in the light, not even a single hair was injured, but rather he was able to kill the other side instantly without being turning into gray stone. A gnome hesitantly asked, "Great Elder, the necromancers have all been killed. I'm afraid our clansmen. There is no way to change the situation now. We can only think of another way to solve it." Clark helplessly gave the order. Make a move first and overturn the undead temple. Although they were not injured, they had consumed a lot of spirit energy. Chu Tian's attacks gradually weakened, and the gnomes finally joined the battle at this time. A single Chu Tian had sent the necromancers into chaos, and now, with the elves involved, they did not even have a chance to escape. They killed their way from the outside of the temple to the inside. Less than 40 of the several hundred necromancers were killed. They could only helplessly retreat into the temple and open a purple barrier, easing the situation a bit. "Didn't you mobs want me to die?" Chu Tian was a bit tired, but his eyes were still incomparably terrifying, making the necromancers tremble in fear. "Now you're trying to kill me. Why are you hiding like a turtle?" The temple's barrier was very strong. Perhaps it couldn't be opened in a short amount of time. But it didn't matter now. It was impossible for these necromancers to escape. "Listen to me. I'll give you one last chance to live," Clark said in a deep voice. "Immediately tell us the method to save our clansmen. Otherwise, you'll be turned to ashes along with this temple." "Ha ha ha." A necromancer priest broke out in laughter. "Do you really think we'll tell you? Green City is doomed to be destroyed. The gnomes are doomed to die. And this place is doomed to become a death zone. We are just entering the embrace of the Nether God first, but you will suffer eternal torture in the abyss of pain and death." These fellows were actually this wild? Stupid human. Do you really think we've lost? The necromancer priest turned to look at the tall altar behind him. I'll let you experience what is called true death and fear. Chu Tian revealed a surprised expression. The death shrine gave off a strange aura. A few altars and statues shattered at the same time, and a large amount of death aura sealed in them gushed out, forming a powerful death storm inside the temple. As the energy storm swept through, cracks appeared all over the shrine, and it began to shake, as if it would explode at any time. Clark's expression changed. Such a strong death energy. Do they want to explode? Quickly retreat. No, we can't retreat. This is a ceremony. Chu Tian shouted at Clark and the others. Stop them. Too late. This ceremony was even faster than Chu Tian imagined. The bodies of the dozens of surviving necromancers were shredded by the storm, and the scattered limbs of the zombies were also swept into the storm. Countless flesh fragments were brought to the center by the high-speed, rotating storm, and finally pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle, unexpectedly forming an 8-meter-tall behemoth. What is this thing? The gnomes were stunned. This 8-meter-tall behemoth was formed by the compression of hundreds of corpses. Its huge head was formed by 8 or 9 heads squeezed together. Its shoulders, chest, and abdomen were all hideous and terrifying human faces. Its limbs and torso were all pieced together from mincemeat. This was a monster formed from the resentment, hatred, and power of several dozen necromancers, as well as the bodies of over 100 soldiers. It was like a giant mountain of flesh, standing in the darkness and releasing a terrifying aura. Abomination. Chu Tian's expression changed. Abomination was a high-level undead monster. Resentment, hatred, slaughter, death, and all kinds of darkness gathered together was the so-called abomination. This was a type of undead monster that was synthesized and not naturally formed. Due to the special nature of undead creatures, when a large number of undead monsters fused together, the power within their bodies would naturally form a cycle. There would never be any signs of rejection. Therefore, for cultivators that used the power of death, abominations were very useful puppets. The strength of abominations was not certain. It mainly depended on the materials used to create them. Several normal corpses could create abominations, but the abominations created like this would not be that strong. Now, there were several dozen necromancers and over 100 zombies that were not weak. This abomination formed was simply a disaster for Green City. This abomination not only gathered the power of these materials, it also knew how to use their magic, so it was not an easy thing to deal with. Clark, the abomination, opened its mouth to speak. The several dozen mouths on its body opened their mouths at the same time. You have made a stupid choice. For this choice, you and your city will be buried in death. This voice was very heavy, and it made people's hearts tremble when they heard it. What Clark was truly afraid of was not the abomination itself, but rather the person making this sound. That's right, this was not the abomination's will because the abomination did not have a will. Someone had used a long-distance method to control the abomination's body, and the abomination's body was being controlled by that fellow. There was no need to guess. He was 100% the Lich. The Lich was not in Green City, but he was relying on the abomination's body to communicate with these people. Chapter 853. How could Chu Tian not be happy? The gnomes had spent several hundred years to build such a solid foundation. How much effort did this save Chu Tian? This was like a person who wanted to buy a house, but in the end, a luxurious beast carriage, a guard, and even a beautiful maid to warm the bed were all given to him. This was truly too beneficial. The gnome research base was the standard of this era. Even the strong empires of the continent were like this. With this kind of good foundation and the technology and Team Chu Tian brought, it would create unimaginable value in the future. Chu Tian was very much looking forward to using this research base. The gnomes' thoughts were not as complicated as humans, but the gnomes could feel that Chu Tian's words weren't just for show. This human seemed to place a lot of importance on scientific research, and having this kind of person become the city lord was beneficial to the gnomes. The elves were strong, but they were not interested in this. So, If Chu Tian fully supported the operation of the research base, he would gain the recognition of the gnomes. There were several dozen low-level dark creatures in the dark creature research base, like evil eyes and cave spiders. There were several hundred of them, and the cost of raising them each day was not a small number. Chu Tian was very puzzled. Why did the gnomes capture these creatures? Could it be they wanted to refine a synthetic life form? This kind of synthetic life form refining was a kind of advanced technology that the gnomes could not do. Clark explained, "There are countless of these creatures in the underground world, and they often harass us. The goal of our research is to find the weakness of these creatures and find a better way to deal with them." Chu Tian stared at a large cave spider and pondered for a few seconds. "You're saying that there are many of these creatures here?" "The underground creatures are not the same as those on the surface. They are more tenacious, and they mostly eat the underground dark plants or directly eat crystal stones to survive. For example, the evil eyes and eye demons live in the crystal mines and obtain energy by eating crystal stones. They grow very quickly, and they're like cockroaches and mice that can't be killed. I suspect that in the area we've explored, there are at least several tens of thousands of them, giving us a headache." "That many?" Chu Tian's eyes lit up. "Good. Very good." The gnomes looked at each other in blank dismay. What did the acting city lord's praise mean? Was it a good thing that there were so many monsters underground? "Is there a map?" "Map? Oh, there is." This was a map of the underground research base. It clearly marked the location of the underground palace and the railway, as well as the mines and caves that had already been explored. As for the areas where the dark creatures often appeared, there were gnomes guarding them. This was to prevent strange creatures from destroying the research base, and also to prevent them from threatening Green City. The underground world was too complicated. It was like a giant maze. According to Chu Tian's understanding of the world, the light and positive energy was distributed in the sky, and the dark and turbid energy was buried underground. The deeper one went underground, the stronger the negative energy. It was unknown how far the forest of chaos underground world extended, but what was certain was that there were evil dark creatures living deep underground. The gnomes did not dare explore too deep and did not dare explore too far, because they were afraid of meeting terrifying monsters that they could not deal with. But even at this level, there were still many monsters living there. "Come, let's take a look at this area." The place Chu Tian was talking about was a cave. Because the cave looked like the gaping mouth of a demon, even the rocks inside were a frightening dark red, so the low cry was called the demon's mouth. It said that most of the underground monsters the gnomes met came out of the demon's mouth. Therefore, the gnomes thought the demon's mouth was an even deeper and more terrifying underground space. In order to not disturb existences that shouldn't be disturbed, the demon's mouth was not allowed to be explored. "Elder," several gnome troops stationed here saw the train stop at the demon's mouth station, and they immediately ran over to ask out of curiosity. "Sir Acting City Lord." Clark looked at Chu Tian and asked, "Are you sure you want to go in? Even the gnomes don't dare explore this place, and even we don't dare go too deep. If you take the risk on a whim, I'm afraid." "It's fine, I'm not a fool. If something is wrong, I'll come back." "All right, then." Chu Tian pulled out his sword and left. Dolores followed without any hesitation. Clark saw that he couldn't persuade Chu Tian, so he had the gnome troops prepare themselves. He then led the old priests to chase after him. At this time, Chu Tian had already walked a certain distance. Dolores observed the surrounding walls and said while walking, "The dark aura here is very thick, making people feel very uncomfortable. The devil's mouse fungus and vines were mostly a strange purple or blue color, and the rocks were a dark red color, making it seem rather dark. The cave was open in all directions. Sometimes it was wide, sometimes it was narrow, sometimes it was steep like a mountain, and sometimes it was deep like a ravine. There were always strange fluctuations and sounds coming from all around, making this place feel an ominous aura. Chu Tian felt the fluctuations in the air. There's a monster coming. Before his voice even fell, there were sharp sounds coming from all directions as giant figures charged out one after another. They were very fast, and even in this complicated terrain, they could still move at high speeds. Other than Chu Tian, they were all in the true spirit realm. Dolores was prepared to make a move, but she didn't even have time to use the demonic god priest's summoning technique. She suddenly felt like she had been hit by a stick and instantly felt dizzy. She couldn't even stand straight and fell onto Chu Tian's body. Chu Tian quickly supported Dolores. A ferocious figure charged over, and several sharp claws swept out like lightning, attempting to tear Chu Tian and Dolores to pieces. Seeking death. Chu Tian's blade was covered in blue flames, and a beautiful sword chi slashed out. The monster gave a pitiful cry and flapped its wings to fly away. However, although it wasn't cut in half by the sword chi, it was covered in the terrifying netherworld flame. It didn't have time to retreat before it was surrounded by blue and white flames, and it turned into ashes with a mournful cry. The gnome priests were all very shocked. Just a casual slash from Chu Tian was enough to show his strength. This was definitely not an attack an awakened soul cultivator could send out. Perhaps even a true spirit expert wouldn't be able to easily block it. This human young brat really wasn't simple. Be careful! Clark recovered from the dizziness and quickly shouted. These are bat demons. They can use spiritual attacks and are very hard to deal with. Chu Tian had indeed been hit by a few weak spiritual attacks, but this spiritual attack couldn't affect him at all. When he had just exchanged blows, he had seen what the attackers looked like. It was a monster with an ape-like human body, but it had bat-like wings. Each one was very big, weighing at least 200 kilograms. Spiritual attacks could affect true spirit experts. This was truly an incredible monster. Chu Tian noticed that the bat demon's spiritual attack was a large area indiscriminate attack released by ultrasonic waves. He couldn't help thinking that if there was this kind of monster on the battlefield, it would sweep through a large area. This was not exaggerated at all. Even a true spirit expert like Dolores was hit without any preparation and instantly lost her battle strength. Wouldn't a normal awakened soul cultivator bleed from their 7 orifices and die? Good, very good. If they could tame this kind of monster and use it for Green City, why would Green City be afraid of invaders? Compared to the Marauders' bat mounts, the bat demons were not only stronger, their intelligence was not low either. They had the intelligence of a 6 or 7-year-old human child. If they could be tamed, they could understand some orders. Chu Tian came here with this goal in mind. Not to mention Chu Tian having several beast taming methods. With the little fox and the demonic god religion's priests, these headache-inducing monsters could be easily tamed. This was not trouble. This was a large amount of wealth. The green religion priests used a secret technique to resist the spiritual wave. Clark forcefully raised his staff, and a vine reached out, instantly wrapping around a fast-flying bat demon. This bat demon gave a pitiful cry as its vitality and water were sucked away, finally turning into a dried corpse that was hung above the cave. They didn't have time to kill more bat demons. The rock wall on the left suddenly shattered, and a few beams of light as thick as an arm shot through the rock wall towards them. A green religion priest quickly activated the talisman, condensing a shield of light and letting the powerful beams of light fall onto the shield of light. It shattered the shield of light and barely blocked this attack. Dolores had just recovered. What happened now? Dolores found that in all directions of the dark cave, there were many light bulbs that appeared at the same time. These lights went from weak to strong and finally became very dazzling, making it hard for people to open their eyes. Evil eyes, damn, there are so many evil eyes. The evil eyes had excellent dark vision, and their range of vision was even greater than an eagle's. Their eyes could break through illusions and camouflage, as well as release a kind of radiation. Even if there was a wall between them, they could still clearly see people. The evil eyes could not make any sounds, so they used their spiritual energy to communicate. Although their intelligence was not high, they had a tacit understanding. This many evil eyes attacking together. This power was more than enough to kill 2 true spirit experts. Clark raised a long staff in his hand high up, and a layer of emerald green light barrier came down. When the evil eye's beams of light hit this barrier, They were all absorbed by it, only creating ripples like water. Great Forest Goddess, please unleash your great power. Clark released a dazzling green light. In the next second, Clark's entire body exploded. His body disappeared and turned into a large field of green leaves. These green leaves were like countless butterflies, fluttering and spreading in all directions like an all-pervasive tide. In an instant, the field of vision was drowned. These leaves looked weak, but they were actually endowed with the power of divine weapons. They could easily slice through the bat demons, and those weak, evil eyes couldn't even withstand a single blow. When the leaves floated past them, their bodies would immediately break into pieces. Dolores said in a shocked voice, "This Clark's strength is not weaker than the shaman's Mars." The leaves all turned back into Clark's short figure. However, there was not a single complete monster in the surroundings. They had all been cut into pieces or even turned into mincemeat. Chu Tian wanted to say a few words of praise, but he felt a strange energy fluctuation. There was an evil eye that had been cut in half that was slowly coming back together, finally standing up again. That large head shook left and right, as if it did not understand what had just happened. Seeing its companions wriggling all over the ground, its eyes began to release a light blue glow. Shwa! The starlight fell onto one of its dying companions, and an incredible thing happened. That evil eye that had been cut into several pieces suddenly came back together and used its tentacles to stand up. Clark knit his brows. He picked up a leaf and was about to smash the strange evil eye. "Slow down. This is a bit interesting." Chu Tian stopped Clark from killing this evil eye. The evil eye's energy comes from its food. If an evil eye had been consuming fire attribute crystals for a few days, its attack beam would become fire attribute. If it had been consuming thunder attribute crystals recently, its attack beam would become thunder attribute. This evil eye's energy is very special, which means that the place it lives and has a special mineral deposit. We might as well let it go for now and find that place. Perhaps it will be useful to us. Chu Tian had already recognized it. Chapter 854. The abomination had fused several dozen necromancers into its body, with around 10 of them being in the true spirit realm. To create the abomination, it had used up the power of the dead sealed in the undead temple, which was a large loss to the undead religion. But the more they paid, the more they could exchange for. This abomination's strength had reached around the 5th true spirit layer, which was already very strong and hard to resist. It had also fused with the Lich's thoughts. In other words, the one controlling the abomination's body and power was the Lich. When the abomination had a clear mind and consciousness, it could use secret techniques and cultivation techniques, which increased the abomination's battle strength by several times. Dong, dong, dong. The abomination took incomparably heavy steps. The gnomes felt like the ground was about to collapse, but the abomination's speed was very fast. Even if there was a mountain in front of it, it could still easily smash it to pieces. This majestic aura had a very strong impact on people's minds. Sealing array. Clark and the Green Religion priests made a move. The ground exploded and several dozen giant wooden stakes came out of the ground. Each wooden stake had a sealing rune engraved on it, and when they were connected, they formed a source energy array. The abomination was sealed in the center of the source energy array. Countless strands of energy spread over the abomination's body, finally forming several green vines. One end was connected to the giant wooden stakes, and the other end was like an iron lock locking the abomination in the center of the source energy array. This array was very strong. Even the abomination could not easily break through it. Therefore, its body paused, and it immediately lost the ability to move. This was just the beginning. The other Green Religion priests also made a move. Countless vines continued to wrap around it, turning the abomination's giant body into a small mountain. The strength of the vine's frantic compression could even crush steel. The abomination's body was also constantly being compressed, but it wasn't crushed. This probably meant that the abomination was at least a bit tougher than steel, but almost everyone believed that no matter how strong the abomination was, it wouldn't be able to break free under this kind of restraint. Kill it, quickly. No matter how strong the abomination was, it was still an individual. The gnomes drew their bows and were about to shoot arrows. There was also a portion of gnomes that directly surrounded the abomination. At this time, they were wrapped in a giant ball that kept spitting out a gray-green poison mist. It spread very quickly, covering the abomination's body in the blink of an eye. This was the poison mist released by the abomination's body, making it so that people could not see the abomination with their naked eyes. Clark revealed a shocked expression. What was going on? Could it be that it still had the strength to resist after being sealed? Chu Tian felt a low chant coming from the abomination's mouth. This was the sound of it chanting a strange incantation, and there was a strong death energy brewing. It was too early. Don't go over. He quickly stopped the gnomes. Retreat. If people could see, the loathsome evil had already been coated with a layer of black death energy. This energy immediately spurted out from its body, and all the places that this energy spread to became the color of obsidian. The vines, the wooden stakes, the ground, the flowers, the plants, and even air itself were all frozen, revealing a large amount of black crystals. This energy was too strong and too fast. The gnome's sealing array suppressed the aura from spreading ahead of time, making it so the gnomes did not have time to sense the danger. When they felt the giant black waves spread out, most of them did not have time to retreat and were instantly submerged. Within 150 meters of the abomination, everything was gone. Several dozen giant trees turned into black obsidian pillars, and countless vines turned into fragile stone chains. The abomination easily broke free, and several hundred gnomes did not have time to retreat. Because they were hit by the energy wave, they instantly turned into black stone statues. Their actions of running for their lives and their expressions of shock and confusion were all frozen on their faces. Too terrifying. What kind of powerful death curse attack was this? It was at least 10 times stronger than what Samuel had released. Clark was filled with rage, but he also felt a trace of fear. Although they had several thousand people, the abomination's strength far surpassed their imaginations. If they kept fighting like this, most of them would die. Clark, I can feel your fear. The abomination gave a cold and sinister voice. After Green Bishop Lonnie's death, a trivial priest like you can't stop Green City's decline. I'll let you see what true strength is today. Clark angrily roared. If the bishop was still alive, how could he allow a fellow like you to be so arrogant? The abomination did not reply. Its body was covered in poison mist, and it released waves from inside out. Wherever it went, as long as it was covered by the waves, it would be covered in a layer of black, turning into a solid obsidian object. The gnomes did not dare block it. With the strength the abomination was showing, perhaps no one in Green City would dare block it. Then, I'll send you to see your beloved bishop. The abomination charged at Clark. Facing this wild energy, Clark's forehead was covered in a cold sweat. He could already smell the strong aura of death. This is bad. It was impossible to block this attack. Clark clearly understood that the Lich's strength was much stronger than the Shaman High Priest Mars. There were only 2 people in Green City that could deal with him in the past 100 years. One was the dying Bishop Lonnie, and the other was the Druid Prophet Yoda. The bishop was already dead. Yoda was not willing to make a move. The abomination charged at him with killing intent, and no one could stop it. At this critical moment, Chu Tian drew his sword. His target was not the abomination, but rather an altar in the undead temple. The abomination felt Chu Tian's movement, and its killing intent instantly increased by several times. With an angry roar, it let go of Clark and charged at Chu Tian. Too late. Chu Tian destroyed the altar with a single slash. The abomination was only halfway there when it began to tremble like it was convulsing. A low and calm voice came from its body. You can see through the source of my power. No matter how strong your divine sense or technique is, you can't control a puppet from this far away. As long as the connection is cut off, how will you be able to cause trouble? Human, I have indeed underestimated you. The abomination's large body suddenly inflated, But it's not over yet. The gnomes shouted in fear. This is bad. It wants to explode. When the Lich's control over the abomination's body was forcefully stripped away, he actually activated the abomination's power to explode. The abomination's energy was too strong, and if it exploded, the consequences would be unimaginable. You're not just looking down on me? Chu Tian's eyes released a green glow, and his hands condensed a power. This was a life energy that was even purer than the green religion's energy. Finally, it turned into a simple seal that slammed into the abomination's body. Life and death. The two powers fiercely confronted each other. The wildly expanding death energy in the abomination's body quickly slowed down. Chu Tian turned around and shouted, "Take advantage of this moment and leave this place." These gnomes were all experts of their race, and they instantly shot out like a rain of arrows. After around 5-6 seconds, with a large explosion sound, the Black Sea swallowed everything within several thousand meters. The ground and the air were all covered in a layer of obsidian-like matter. When Chu Tian took care of the abomination, what he needed to do next was to take care of the plague. The plague in Green City broke out without any warning, and around 40-50,000 people were affected. Most of them were gnomes, and most of them were young children or adults with low cultivations. They were a relatively weak group. These infected people all had blue and black bodies. Their limbs were weak, and most of them were unconscious. This was clearly not a normal disease. Most of the gnomes had decent cultivations, so it was hard for a normal disease to have this kind of effect in a short period of time. Chu Tian had not just saved Clark's life. He had also saved the lives of several thousand gnome elites. No matter how much prejudice Clark had towards Chu Tian before, he was now completely convinced by Chu Tian. This human's abilities and talents far surpassed his imagination. He indeed had the qualifications to become Green City's city lord. Perhaps he had the ability to solve the problem of the plague. What is going on with the plague? So many people are infected at the same time. There must be a source of infection. Clark had not completely recovered from the feeling of escaping death, but he was not a normal person. So he had already calmed down. We've checked the food and drinking water, but we haven't found any signs of infection. There is no direct evidence that it is contagious, but the number of people infected is still increasing. We haven't found the cause even now. Chu Tian did not say anything. He began to check the patients. It was a little girl who looked less than a meter tall. At this moment, she was in a trance and had fallen into a coma. Her teeth were constantly grinding, making cracking sounds. Under her originally white and tender skin, the blue and black blood vessels could already be seen. Her body temperature was very high. Her heartbeat was very fast. Chu Tian pressed his hand on his forehead, carefully sensing the situation in his body. Chu Tian's initial guess was correct. This was not an infection caused by microorganisms, but a type of dark energy. After the dark energy seeped into the body of a living being, it would gradually affect and transform the living being. This was the so-called demonization reaction, but it was not completely demonization. Instead, it was following a set pattern, like a curse, changing the biological form bit by bit. Chu Tian took out a talisman paper, quickly drew a talisman array, and lightly stuck it on the little girl's head. A grayish-black aura immediately spread out from her body. Clark quickly asked when he saw this, "Can you find out what it is?" "This is the aura of a corpse eater." Chu Tian judged. "I estimate that in around 2 days, if they can't purify their bodies, most of these infected people will turn into corpse eaters. This should be a premeditated plot." Clark was shocked. What? Turn into corpse eaters? Ghouls were semi-undead monsters that were directly transformed from living creatures. They had low intelligence, were easy to control, had extraordinary strength, and had a ferocious temperament. Necromancers, or cultivators who practiced special cultivation methods, like to mass produce these things. They were more powerful than skeleton soldiers and ordinary zombies. They were suitable for both hard labor and cannon fodder. Clark thought of the several tens of thousands of clansmen that would turn into corpse eaters, and he was filled with rage. These damn necromancers. Is there a way to cure her? Sir Acting City Lord, You have to save my daughter. Sir Acting City Lord, please save my brother. Sir Acting City Lord. The gnomes all surrounded Chu Tian. Although the gnomes looked down on humans, even Great Elder Clark couldn't find out, but this human had easily found out. This meant that this human had a bit of skill. Everyone listen to me. The gnomes all calmed down. Chu Tian explained to everyone, infecting so many people at once, the source of the contamination is not food or water. I suspect that the necromancers are arranging a large array, wanting to pour a large amount of death energy into Green City. These weak people being infected early is just a sign. If my guesses aren't wrong, a large amount of energy has already filled the air above Green City, and it can explode at any time. What? Could something else be happening? Chu Tian explained. The necromancers must be trying to pollute Green City into a land of the dead, turning all the living beings here into undead, making all the plants here rot, and making the soil forever be covered in death energy. This way, the eternal forest will not accept this land, and even the other powers will not accept this land. Green City will collapse on its own. Polluting an entire forest city? Was this really possible? A forest city was not like a place where humans lived. A forest city was this large. So how strong of an energy was needed to pollute it? Chu Tian didn't know how the Lich did this, but it seemed like this was the only explanation. After Chu Tian went into closed-door cultivation, he felt that Green City was covered in an indescribable, strange atmosphere. Now he could determine that this was a kind of energy and a power that could be controlled. There were not many changes to the plants in Green City, which meant that this energy was controlled by humans, actively polluting some of the weaker gnomes. Wanting to do this was not easy. First, one needed a strong energy source, and then one needed a high level of skill. This Lich was not simple. He had some skills. It was no wonder. He had lived for 2,000 years after all. For a fellow to live for 2,000 years, his wisdom and knowledge was not something normal beings could compare to. No need to worry. I will quickly treat the infected people, but this is not a cure. Our priority right now is to find the mastermind behind the scenes. Only by killing that damn Lich can we solve this problem. There is still hope? The gnomes excitedly cheered. This was the first time they realized that humans were not as bad as they imagined. At least this acting city lord was very capable. As for those damn necromancers, they were even more hateful than shamans. They had to be completely exterminated. Chapter 855. The burning sword chi swept across the ground. Those dying evil eyes were all turned to ashes. The last remaining evil eye shook its huge head. Its consciousness felt a strong sense of danger, and it instinctively turned around and burrowed in a certain direction. Follow. The underground world was too complicated, and the gnomes could not understand it all. Although this place was not far from the entrance to the demon's sin, even Clark and the others did not know what was hidden there. After around 40 minutes, the evil eye entered another cave. It should be here. Chu Tian had not passed through the cave when he felt a wave of pure star energy. After passing through the cave, there was a large basin in front of him with meteor grass and other plants growing all over the ground. They were all at least level 3 meteor grass. This kind of quality not only needed tens of thousands of years to grow, it also needed a very good environment to grow. Chu Tian swung his sword to kill the unlucky evil eye, leading the way, and immediately began to search the area. This place is... The others who came in were a bit stunned. This terrain did not seem like it was naturally formed. Rather, it seemed like it was formed in the ancient era by a giant force. In the rocks and on the ground, there are all kinds of materials that release starlight everywhere. Star iron. Chu Tian found a piece of iron covered in starlight. This is a high-purity star iron ore. This thing is the best material for high-level source energy arrays or high-level airships. I never thought that there would be this much here. If my guesses aren't wrong, this place was formed by a meteorite. There was also star silver and star gold here. They were all priceless top-quality materials. Ha, we struck it rich this time. Chu Tian found a few more pieces of crystal and found that the entire basin was covered in glowing crystals, star crystals. There are actually star crystals all over the ground. Dolores and the gnomes looked at him with a strange gaze. Of course, they didn't know the value of these things. Star crystals were star crystals, also known as star stones. Chu Tian had picked them up in the Central State Trial Tower, and just a few small pieces were enough for a group of people to break through to the starlight immortal body. Now there were star stones everywhere. Perhaps it couldn't be counted in pieces. It could be piled up in several mountains. This was simply a star mine. Star metal was an excellent material, and star crystal was even more precious. It could allow thousands or even tens of thousands of people to cultivate the starlight immortal body, and they would at least be able to cultivate the diamond body. The starlight immortal body was a non-attributed cultivation technique, and the starlight was a rare neutral energy, so even a member of the church like Dolores could cultivate it. Therefore, this mine had a large amount of value. With such a large amount of star crystals, how many top experts could be trained? The Central State Meteor Grass Basin was also formed by a meteorite, but the meteorite that created the basin had very little star crystals. When it hit the ground, it had already evaporated and only relied on the remaining energy to grow the meteor grass. This star pit was completely different. The meteorite shattered and buried a large amount of star crystals in the ground, forming a mine. Since there are this many star crystals, perhaps there is that thing. Chu Tian's expression changed, and he suddenly became a bit excited. Quickly look for it. Perhaps there is a top-quality treasure here. Once this thing is dug out, I can guarantee that not only will we become rich, the entire Green City will become a great weapon in 2-3 years. It will be enough to become one of the most influential cities in the Forest of Chaos. How could there be this kind of thing? Dolores had a look of disbelief. Could it be that we can dig out a divine weapon? What does a divine weapon count for? Even if we were given a divine weapon, would we be able to use it? Chu Tian rarely lost his calm and anxiously said, "This thing's significance to us right now is not something even 10 divine weapons can compare to. All right, let's not waste words first and quickly find this thing." What kind of treasure had this much value? It couldn't even compare to 10 divine weapons. Clark gave a soft cough. You have to tell us what kind of thing it is. Chu Tian didn't even have time to explain before the ground in front of him suddenly exploded. The rock was shattered by some kind of power, and a majestic and vast energy rushed out, quickly condensing into form. Dolores cried out in shock. What kind of monster is this? The creature that broke out of the rock was a giant man that was over 2 meters tall. His body was covered in a strong electromagnetic halo, and he was bald. He was very strong, but he didn't have any facial features. This was not a physical creature, but rather some kind of elemental life form. Star elemental. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. Be careful. This fellow is very hard to deal with. Dolores threw out a bottle and used the demonic god priest summoning technique. With a roar, the 6-armed ape was summoned. It was also an incorporeal form of energy, and under Dolores's control, it charged at the star elemental. The 6-armed ape's 6 fists turned into a sky filled with fists, wildly slamming into the star elemental's body. A shocking scene occurred. When these fists hit the star elemental, it wasn't the star elemental that shattered, but rather the 6-armed ape's fists. It was like a drop of water hitting steel. The moment the 6-armed ape attacked the star elemental, its 6 arms were crushed. The power that was reflected turned into a fierce current of air that filled the entire space. The star elemental silently moved forward and slapped out with its palm. The 6-armed ape did not even have a chance to struggle, as its body was like water meeting high temperature, instantly disappearing without a trace. Dolores's expression turned very ugly. This is bad. Its destructive might is at least in the 4th true spirit layer, or even higher. We'll be done for if we're hit by it. Clark led the green religion priests to attack at the same time. Countless vines wrapped around the star elemental like a dumpling, but this attack had no meaning. The star elemental just shook its body, and the vines that could even wrap around a mammoth were all shattered into pieces. Clark already knew that this was bad. This monster's strength was much higher than they imagined. The star elemental raised its arm, and a storm of energy gathered in its palm. Clark quickly waved his hand and summoned a barrier that was covered in vines. Quickly run. Could they run? When the star elemental's arms swept out, a several dozen-meter long blade of starlight instantly swept out, shattering Clark's defenses. That terrifying strength sent several people flying like they were pieces of paper, and almost everyone was injured. The star elemental's body turned into an electromagnetic beam, and with a few flickers, it directly rushed towards Clark. Although it didn't have any intelligence, it had instincts. It knew that Clark's cultivation was the highest, so he was the first target. This is bad. Clark's cultivation was not low, but he didn't have the strength to deal with this fellow. The star elemental used its powerful energy to form a protective shield around its body. Even all-out attack would not be able to break it. The star elemental also had a terrifying destructive power that these people could not defend against. Bang! The star elemental's palm came. Clark raised his wooden staff to block. The terrifying energy formed a shockwave that instantly spread in all directions. The surrounding space was like an earthquake, constantly shattering as huge rocks fell down. Caca! Clark could clearly feel that the staff in his hand had cracks. He was almost unable to resist, but the star elemental's power was still getting stronger. Great Elder! Several green religion priests quickly joined hands, and several giant logs drilled out of the ground. Each log was covered in inscriptions, and they quickly wrapped around the star elemental's body. A powerful sealing power suppressed the star elemental. Since it would cause a backlash if it was attacked directly, they would use the sealing power to weaken it. But there was still no effect. The giant logs with the sealing power seemed like they were being burned by flames as they turned black. If this continued, the green religion priests wouldn't be able to hold on for long. There was no other way. If it didn't make a move, these fellows would all die. Chu Tian released a powerful aura, and a nine-eyed demon god appeared in the air. When Chu Tian raised the sword in his right hand, the nine-eyed demon god raised a jet-black demon god sword. Dolores was completely shocked by this power. Only now did she know that Chu Tian had hidden his strength. This power was actually this terrifying. Although he was only in the awakened soul realm, if he used his full strength, it would be enough to instantly kill a low-level, true spirit cultivator. Die! Chu Tian stabbed at the star elemental. The star elemental was attacking Clark while being sealed by the green religion priests. Chu Tian's full-strength attack stabbed into the star elemental's body. Normally, this kind of attack would have no effect on an elemental being, but Chu Tian had already used the power of his source spirit. The moment Chu Tian stabbed out, the demon god's sword stabbed into the star elemental's body. The star elemental did not have a mouth and could not make sound. However, everyone could clearly feel that there was an extremely mournful scream and wail reverberating in their minds. It was as if a detonator had been shoved into their brains, and it was enough to make everyone dizzy and knock their heads against each other. The star elemental's body quickly twisted. Like gas meeting an exhaust fan, the star essence condensed into a body of starlight, and it was all sucked into Chu Tian's body through the demon god's sword. It filled Chu Tian's meridians, muscles, and bones in an extremely short period of time. This vast amount of star energy almost made Chu Tian explode. Whether it was Clark or Dolores, it didn't matter. They all had a strange feeling that Chu Tian had turned into a black hole and swallowed the star elemental in one go. Swallowing effect? No, this strange ability seemed to be one of Chu Tian's many abilities. They could also feel various auras coming from Chu Tian, like his soul, his mind, his space, and his time. These people were all true spirit experts. They were all toppled at this moment. How is this possible? Chu Tian swallowed the star elemental and fell to the ground. Every pore on his body released starlight, and he could only barely support himself with his sword. Blood flowed from his nose and eyes. This was the side effect of his source spirit's backlash. Everyone did not even have time to let out a sigh of relief. There were suddenly several explosions coming from the distance. Clark's eyes almost popped out. There are still many star elemental. Dolores also saw that there wasn't just one star elemental here. there were many star elemental. There were a few that were very large, and their auras were several times that of the previous one. Quickly run. Clark did not even think as he threw out a vine to wrap around Chu Tian, wanting to quickly escape. Wait a minute. Chu Tian pointed at the place where the star elemental had been killed. In the slowly fading light, a strange gem flew out. We have to take this eye of the star. Dolores charged forward to grab the gem, and they quickly left the area. Chapter 856. Because they were discovered in time, the gnomes could still be saved. However, because there were too many of them, saving them would be very troublesome. They would need to collect materials and refine medicine. Who could guarantee that Green City wouldn't become worse during this process? There was no time at all. Chu Tian thought of the little fox. It could directly absorb the death energy implanted in the bones, so saving these people shouldn't be a problem. This would save him quite a bit of trouble, not to mention that he was about to fight the undead religion. The little fox was a very important secret weapon, so naturally he had to bring it with him. This fellow looked ordinary. It was actually the nemesis of these undead monsters. It had been bred in the fox-faced corpse king's body for tens of thousands of years. It was born with the most mean and evil nature, but it could restrain evil spirits. Even if it was a 1,000-year corpse monster from the 10,000 corpse ancient tomb, the little fox could directly suck its soul flame dry, causing it to wither to death. A 1,000-year corpse monster was not weaker than a true spirit realm expert under normal circumstances. The little fox already had the ability to restrain a 1,000-year corpse monster when it was born, and now that it had grown several times, its strength should be even stronger. With the little fox's help, their chances of winning were naturally much higher. Not long after, Dolores brought the little fox back. The Fox Clan's high priest had sent over 200 elite summoners. These were the followers of the demonic god religion that served the demonic god. The little fox could be considered unparalleled right now. The Fox Clan treated it like a spiritual god, and there were large amounts of fox people protecting it every day. This lineup was even more exaggerated than Chu Tian's. We respectfully greet the demonic god. Several hundred Fox Clan members knelt down on one knee. Dolores held the little fox like a holy maiden holding a sacred object, walking through the crowd of devout believers. There were several hundred Fox Clan beauties following her. Clark and the other green religion priests stared at each other with wide eyes. This little fox is the so-called demonic god? According to what Chu Tian told them, this fox was just a pet he raised. Although the demonic god religion were locals, their strength was not bad. Now, they were treating Chu Tian's pet as a spiritual god. This was a bit unbelievable. Great Elder, does this little fox really have this kind of ability? That's right, we didn't feel any energy fluctuations coming from it. This kind of matter was hard to believe no matter who it was. Chu Tian had already left, and they couldn't ask him what he was doing. They saw the demonic god religion summoners send the little fox over in a very exaggerated manner. The Fox Clan girls lifted the little fox high up, and the little fox lazily stood up. Like a lion that had just woken up, it opened its paw and shook its soft snow-white fur. It had a lazy expression as it looked at these people. Finally, its eyes fell onto the rows of patients on stretchers, and it suddenly sucked in a deep breath. The gnomes were stunned. The little fox's actions caused the energy in the entire valley to change. It was like it wasn't a palm-sized fox breathing, but rather an ancient giant whale. The several thousand patients all slightly twitched as traces of weak black energy seeped out of their pores. It all gathered in the air and condensed into a giant ball. That ball looked like a black flame was burning, and there was black smoke coming out of it. It was like fuel was being poured into it, and the black ball was becoming more and more vigorous. Great Elder, quickly look. The little fox sucked out the energy from the patients, and the unconscious gnomes all regained consciousness as their faces slowly turned rosy. It's effective. It's really effective. This fox is truly too mysterious. Most of these gnomes were children, and when the family of the gnomes saw this, they all had tears of gratitude in their eyes. almost kneeling down to the little fox. Dolores muttered, "This is the Lord Demonic God's power? The Lord Demonic God is only an infant." The Fox clan members were all very excited. This infant demonic god would definitely become an existence that was not inferior to a demon god in the future. The little fox used more than half an hour to finally suck out all the energy in the patient's body. The black fireball in the sky was as heavy as a piece of lead, and if it fell, it would create a large hole in this area. The death energy would be able to kill all living beings within several hundred meters. Under this kind of strong energy pollution, how could a person not be affected? The little fox opened its mouth and turned it into a stream that flowed into the little fox's stomach. The little fox's stomach bulged up, but when it gently patted its round stomach, it quickly shriveled up again. The little fox raised a claw and waved it. "Yes, Your Majesty the demonic god." Dolores respectfully cupped her hands and walked forward to say, "Our Majesty the demonic god has said that these people are fine. Send them down and let the next batch come in." The valley was filled with an uproar. Countless gnomes shed tears of gratitude. The little fox had not only saved these children, it had also saved the entire Green City gnomes. The little fox wagged its tail in a very happy manner, enjoying the feeling of being worshipped by others. Its master was truly useless, actually calling this fox for such a small matter. Batch after batch, the little fox cured them all. But during this process, more people were infected in Green City, and the little fox did not have time to cure them one by one. These newly infected people still had about a week of safety. As long as they could eliminate the culprit in time, then everything would fall apart on its own. In the city lord's castle, the little fox was sent to the discussion hall like a star around the moon. Chu Tian sat in the highest position in the discussion hall. Clark sat on the left. Dolores held the little fox, sitting on the right, and the others stood in 2 rows below. The little fox had displayed its might to save tens of thousands of people, so now the Fox clan worshipped it even more. Even the gnomes viewed it as a savior. The little fox had only come to Green City to show off a bit of its skills, but it was already more worshipped than the acting city lord. "Fox, I haven't seen you in a few days. It seems like you've gotten fatter." Chu Tian narrowed his eyes as he looked at this fellow. "I think the Fox clan has suffered a lot for being eaten by you." The little fox did not have any manners as it spat on the ground. Then it raised its middle finger at Chu Tian, or more accurately, it raised its middle claw. This fox is now the Lord Fey God that tens of thousands of people look up to. Accepting their offerings is already showing them respect. So what do you know? How troublesome. This fox was becoming more and more arrogant. Now Chu Tian couldn't control it anymore. "Don't waste time. It's time for you to work." Chu Tian stared at it. "The location of the Lich's spell must be in the southern forest. Find it for me. When the plague broke out, we sent out scouts to investigate, but we never found a single clue." Clark was a bit hesitant. "Are you sure you can find it? Was this matter that hard?" The little fox took out the divine eye and infused it with divine sense, beginning to observe. Chu Tian's eyes gradually turned a pale gold, which was the color of divine sense. He established a spiritual connection with the little fox, so whatever the little fox saw, Chu Tian could also see. Large patches of forest to the south of Green City had withered, with countless thousands of year-old trees dying in a single night. There were large amounts of demon beast and native corpses everywhere. They had all been contaminated by some kind of energy, turning into undead creatures. Before long, these creatures would become an undead army. This kind of contamination was not something that could be completed in a single day. The necromancers had been planning this for a long time. "Slow down, it's right here." Chu Tian suddenly called out. "This basin has a barrier, so it's most likely inside. Fox, go and take a look." Chu Tian locked onto a basin. Because he could feel the aura of the barrier, Chu Tian knew that there was something strange about this place. Although the scene was blocked, the dense death energy that permeated from within could not fool Chu Tian and the little fox. The little fox activated the divine eye in its hand and looked into the inside of the barrier. Large amounts of gray buildings appeared in its field of view. There were altars arranged in a certain pattern on the ground, connecting together to form a large array. There were several hundred gray-robed, masked warlocks currently jumping around the altars, casting spells. These altars seemed to be built on some kind of ruins. This could explain the source of this powerful energy. The Lich must have borrowed the energy from the ruins to attack Green City, which was why it had such a powerful effect. We've already found the Lich's lair. Chu Tian's eyes flashed with a sharp glow, but looking at their appearance, this ceremony has already reached its end. In just a few days, the entire Green City will be filled with this death energy, turning it into an eternal land of decay. The surrounding areas will not be spared either, so we don't have much time left. Everyone's expressions were not good. Who would have thought that the situation would be this serious? The shaman sorcerers only wanted to destroy Green City, but the necromancers were even more ruthless. They wanted to pollute the entire area and exterminate all life, turning this land into an undead territory that only the undead could live in. The entire Green City was facing a life and death situation. The so-called there will be no intact eggs when the nest is overturned. Not only did they need the gnome army, they also needed the help of the local powers. It was best if they called Luz's group over, giving the shamans a chance to atone for their crimes. What was in that basin? Chu Tian could feel that the source of the death energy was actually a very ancient ruin. The Lich had used the ruins to build the barrier and released the death energy from the ruins into Green City. This ruin was not simple. In terms of the intensity of the death energy, it was not weaker than the 10,000 corpse ancient tomb. It was several times denser, otherwise it would not have been able to destroy the large Green City. Chu Tian's communication device rang. "Hey, Vivian, why is it you?" He picked it up. "I'm very busy right now. I'll contact you later." "Big brother Chu Tian, wait a minute." Vivian's voice came from the communication device. Elder sister Qingwu said that the corpses in the barrels have been refined. Oldman Small Town doesn't need them, and you don't have any helpers in Green City. So we're prepared to send the corpses to you in the space warehouse. You have to remember to receive them. What? Chu Tian was a bit surprised, but he said in a satisfied voice, Good, good. I'm lacking fighters." Chapter 857. It could only be said that they were lucky this time. The star elementals did not have any intelligence, and only knew how to instinctively attack creatures that intruded into their territory. But when the intruders left, they did not chase after them. This allowed them to leave the underground world alive. Otherwise, with the star elemental speed, even if they couldn't kill them all, they could at least kill half of them. Chu Tian did not have time to explain. His body was filled with a vast amount of star energy, and if he did not quickly refine this energy, perhaps his body would explode at any moment. When he returned to the surface, he quickly went to a secluded valley in Green City. He sat down on a giant rock and began to cultivate. Each pore released the aura of star energy, and his body was covered in starlight, as if it could break out of his body at any moment. This situation was very dangerous, but it was a very good opportunity. The starlight energy was refined by the star elementals over countless years. The amount of energy he swallowed in an instant was not inferior to absorbing a ton of star crystals. Once this energy was refined, Chu Tian's starlight immortal body cultivation technique would reach another level. If it wasn't for the fact that he had cultivated this starlight immortal body, Chu Tian's body would have been tempered by the power of the stars for a long time, so he would have a high tolerance for the power of the stars. If it wasn't for the fact that the power of the stars was a pure energy without any attribute, it would be very gentle. Otherwise, with such a violent surge of energy directly pouring into his body, even if he didn't explode and die, he would probably be half crippled or severely disabled. It's starting. Chu Tian began to circulate his cultivation technique. The star energy stopped rampaging through his body and began to evenly distribute throughout his body. It slowly seeped into his skin, muscles, and bones, almost fusing with his body. Again and again, the tempering began. Chu Tian could clearly feel that his body was quickly being strengthened. under the tempering of the power of the stars. Each muscle was filled with endless vitality, becoming 10 times stronger than before. Finally, the elemental energy accumulated in his body was completely turned into the power of the starlight immortal body. The effects were immediate. Chu Tian could clearly feel the cultivation technique in his body becoming stronger. The starlight on Chu Tian's body was no longer as transparent as a diamond. Instead, it emitted a burst of light from the inside out. His entire body was like a man of light, so bright that it was somewhat dazzling. The rock he was sitting on began to crack under the pressure of the powerful energy. It was as if it was being crushed into powder. Chu Tian understood. He had succeeded. This state was the sacred light body that had achieved great success. The starlight immortal body cultivation techniques. 4 stages were the glass body, diamond body, sacred light body, and starlight body. The glass body was the small success stage. The diamond body was the proficient stage. The sacred light body was the large success stage, and the starlight body was the perfection stage. This meant that the cultivation technique had reached the perfection stage. Compared to the glass body, the diamond body not only had a large increase in defense, it also had a large increase in reflexes. Compared to the diamond body, the sacred light body not only had a stronger defense, the sacred light body's greatest effect was its regeneration. Even if Chu Tian's internal organs were heavily injured, as long as he had spirit energy to activate the sacred light body, these injuries would quickly be healed. Other than that, the sacred light body also had a high resistance to curses, corrosion, and demonization attacks. Chu Tian's defense and battle strength had been increased by a large amount. In other words, when the starlight immortal body was cultivated to the large success sacred light body state, it was no longer a pure defensive cultivation technique. Rather, it was a cultivation technique with a strong healing ability. Even if he received a fatal injury, he could still be healed. However, the biggest surprise was not the increase in his cultivation technique. Along with the increase in his cultivation technique, Chu Tian could clearly feel his cultivation bottleneck loosen. This meant that the opportunity had finally arrived, and he could use it to attack the true spirit realm. How could he miss this good chance? Chu Tian quickly condensed his essence blood and began to charge towards a higher realm. Chu Tian had lived an extra life and had experienced this process before, so naturally he was familiar with it. He lifted it like it was light and steadily attacked the bottleneck. After 3 days, there was an earth-shattering sound coming from the valley. The spiritual energy in the surrounding several miles gathered, and it was like an invisible mouth swallowing all the spiritual energy. Finally, everything calmed down. Chu Tian slowly opened his eyes, and his eyes shined with a glow that was as sharp as an eagle's. He let out a long sigh, and like a sword or a bolt of lightning, he instantly shattered the giant boulder in front of him. Success. True Spirit Realm. The True Spirit Realm was different from the Awakened Soul Realm. The Awakened Soul Realm was just developing the Source Spirit, and the True Spirit Realm was refining the spirit energy in the body into true spirit energy. When one reached the True Spirit Realm, their spirit energy would increase by a large amount with every increase in cultivation. Chu Tian had crossed an entire large realm, but he did not create any earth-shattering phenomenon. This was completely different from the past. It had to be known that around a year ago, when he broke through to the Awakened Soul Realm in the Corpse Valley, it caused the entire world to tremble. Every time his cultivation increased several times, it created shocking phenomena. This was a large realm leap, but it was no different from a normal cultivator. Why was this? This was the benefit of reaching the true spirit realm. Chu Tian was completely different from before. He now had the ability to control his own strength. He could restrain his aura and prevent it from leaking, so naturally he could suppress the phenomenon. The Awakened Soul Realm was divided into the Void Soul, Illustrious Soul, and True Soul Realm. The True Spirit Realm was also divided into the early, middle, and late stages. The first to third layer was the Earth Spirit Realm. The fourth to sixth layer was the Heaven Spirit Realm. and the 7th to 9th layer was the spirit transformation realm. Chu Tian was an earth spirit cultivator of the rank 1 true spirit, but with the perfection realm, netherworld flame sword, and the large success realm, starlight immortal body. His strength was not something that ordinary cultivators of the same level could imagine, but if they thought that this was his only trump card, then they would be completely wrong. The true spirit realm could be considered a watershed. After Chu Tian reached the true spirit realm, he could now use the abilities that were hard to use. For example, spatial energy. The starting point of spatial energy was the true spirit realm, and if it was used in source energy arrays, the lowest level spatial source energy array was a level 3 array. This was also why Chu Tian wanted to recruit Vivian. It was because Chu Tian could not open the space warehouse in the awakened soul realm. Now it was good. From today onwards, he would open a new world. Chu Tian could feel that there was still some star elemental energy that had not been refined into his body. These remnant things were not abilities, but rather innately formed cultivation techniques. Chu Tian named them the Starlight Secret Art. This was a close combat and movement cultivation technique that could be cultivated together with the Starlight Immortal Body. The two of them had the same origin. This could make up for the weakness of the Starlight Immortal Body in terms of speed and attack power. Although it had limited value for Chu Tian in the future, if it was passed on to Ying and the young Miss, it would greatly improve their battle strength. Even if it was the young Miss who did not have any battle talent and source spirit, she would still have a decent battle strength. My harvest this time is too big. Chu Tian took out something from his chest. This was a stone similar to a star crystal, but it was different from normal star crystals. This star crystal had a picture of an eye, which released an ancient and mysterious aura. I have a star, an extremely precious material. The core of a large starlight meteorite. The core of the star elemental was this eye of the star. Chu Tian could even use this eye of the star in his hand to create another star elemental. Even if Chu Tian swallowed this eye of the star, his starlight immortal body could reach the perfection realm. This sounded very tempting, but Chu Tian would not do this. Chu Tian understood that this precious material had an even more important use, which was to mark space coordinates. It could be used as the core of a space gate. This eye of the star was not big. It couldn't be used to create a large space gate, but it was enough to create a space transfer array. The space transfer array and the space warehouse were two different things. The space warehouse was just a locked space, using the space as a foundation to transport materials, but the space could not hold life forms. The space transfer array was different. This was a kind of array that could transport life forms. In other words, Chu Tian could create a transfer array in Green City, and then he could create a transfer array anywhere on the continent. Using the eye of the star to mark the space coordinates, both sides could teleport. This was the value of the eye of the star. In this underground space, there seemed to be more than one eye of the star. If he could obtain a large amount of eyes of the star, Chu Tian could create transfer arrays all over the continent. In the future, it would be very convenient to transport people, and this would have an immeasurable effect on Green City's development. Chu Tian took back the eye of the star. The eye of the star was the core of the transfer array, but just the eye of the star was not enough. He still needed to find some precious spatial crystals. These spatial crystals were not as precious as the eye of the star, but as a rare spatial attributed material, it was not easy to collect them. However, the gnomes should have some in their research facility, so Chu Tian could borrow some to use first. When Chu Tian walked out of the valley, Dolores immediately came forward to greet him. "You came out this quickly?" Chu Tian shrugged his shoulders. "Of course, don't you know who I am?" Where did Clark and the others go?" The plague has suddenly broken out these past few days, infecting many gnomes in Green City. The gnomes have all gone to investigate. Plague? You still don't know? Actually, there's been a plague in the forest, but most of the time it was in the southern forest. It has recently been spread to Green City. Come, let's go take a look. There was something wrong with Green City. The entire city was covered in an indescribably strange atmosphere. Before Chu Tian came to Green City, the plague had already broken out in the southern forest. There were several local armies that had been wiped out, and large areas of the forest had been polluted by the plague. The situation was quite serious, but it was only in the forest. He didn't know what was going on, but the plague had broken out in Green City. In just a few days, it had infected 40,000 people, and the situation could be said to be very dangerous. This really was seeing a living ghost. Chu Tian had used the tax exemption policy to keep the merchants, but now he had to run away on a large scale. Chapter 858. There was a gray tower-like structure with a strange conical altar in the center. It was pointed at the bottom and round at the top, just like a several dozen-meter-long awl inserted into the ground. It was made of dark crystal, and there were countless runes drawn on it. There was a gray-robed necromancer priest sitting on top of the altar with his arms open, silently chanting an incantation. The source energy array on the altar released a dark red glow, and a thick energy was being extracted from the ground like water. It was then spread out through the awl-like structure, finally being stored in the Towers of Death. As more and more energy was accumulated in the towers, some of the energy leaked out. As it rubbed against each other, it created black lightning. Several hundred towers of death gathered a terrifying amount of energy. The necromancer priest slowly put down his hands. His hands were completely withered like tree branches, and the face under the cloak was also a completely withered face. There was only a layer of lifeless, dark, purple skin sticking to his bones, and there were blue-purple undead flames coming from his eyes. Without a doubt, it was not a living being, rather it was a lich. The lich's withered face did not have any expression, and in fact it could not make any expressions. It was very difficult for a lich to have any emotions. He had even forgotten the feelings of joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. Even for a normal being, 2,000 years was enough to make them old and tired, not to mention a lich that did not have any sense of touch, smell, sight, or hearing, or even desire. He could not remember what it felt like to be a living being. From the moment he turned into a lich, he was destined to lose the instincts of a living being. What he was doing now was just a way of doing things that was imprinted in the depths of his soul. He was like a machine that followed this order. As for success or failure, it did not make any difference to him. A lich that had lived for 2,000 years, all traces of a living being had disappeared long ago. He was destined to be an obsession. The lich's floating body coincidentally overlapped with the moon. An incomparably awkward and complicated incantation came out from his mouth. The surrounding towers of death all trembled. With a thunderous sound, the 100 towers of death erupted with energy at the same time. Like a volcano, a wave of death energy poured into the sky, forming a large dark cloud that shrouded the sky. Sir, the energy in these ruins is too strong. It is simply inexhaustible. A necromancer priest said to the lich in a low voice, "As long as it accumulates a certain amount, we can bombard Green City in one go, and those stupid gnomes will instantly die. At that time, Green City will be your territory, and no one will be able to resist us. We can use this energy to produce large amounts of undead, becoming the overlord of this area. The human will come." The lich opened his mouth to speak. More accurately, he did not open his mouth because the human organs on the lich's body were already useless, so he could not use his vocal cords to communicate. The lich used spirit energy to make the air around him vibrate, creating an effect similar to speaking. This required a very high level of spirit energy control, and normal cultivators would not be able to grasp it even if they studied for several decades. However, for the lich that had an almost infinite lifespan, problems that could be solved with time were not a problem. His voice did not seem like it came from a living being. It was like the dry sound of a machine grinding against each other. It was sharp and unpleasant to listen to, without any anger at all. The necromancer priest said in a very disdainful voice, "It's just a trivial human. Why do we need to care about him? Not to mention that we have obtained the power of the ruins. They will die if they charge in." The lich did not explain, but he knew in his heart that this human was not simple. He had lived for over 2,000 years, so he still had this bit of judgment. Everyone set off and blocked the Green City army. In another 48 hours, the ceremony will be completed. I don't want to be interrupted. Yes. The Lich was the absolute authority in the necromancer priest's mind. Therefore, no one would resist or question the Lich's orders. At dawn, on the central plains of Green City, 100,000 soldiers had already gathered. The gnome Great Elder and Green City High Priest Clark, the demonic god priest Dolores, the Minotaur Arnold, the shaman priest Luz, and several local chiefs had all gathered. Because of the urgency of the situation, there was no time for more troops to gather. This world did not care about quantity, but quality. If the army in the center of the Forest of Chaos was dragged to the southern summer country, the battle strength of 100,000 people was enough to destroy the southern summer Imperial Region's army. We are already prepared. We asked the high priest to command. The atmosphere was very heavy. Everyone had already realized that this battle did not just concern a city. Several hundred miles of forest would also be affected. Even the life and death of their clansmen would be affected. Chu Tian was an outsider after all, so he did not understand the terrain of the forest and the troops. Therefore, Clark had to command this battle. Clark looked around with knitted brows. Where's the acting city lord? Why isn't he here yet? He's here. He's here. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Tian brought 18 silent figures over. I found helpers and accidentally came late. I'm truly sorry. Everyone was a bit stunned. Wasn't this brat by himself? Where did these 18 fellows come from? Although they had never seen these 18 people before, when they stood beside Chu Tian, there was a strong mountain-like pressure. The divine blood-in corpses had been tempered by the divine blood for a long time, so naturally they had been reborn. From the skin to the bones, from the flesh to the marrow, they had all been tempered. Not only did they have the defensive power of a peak defensive cultivation technique, they also had a trace of an indestructible spiritual god. The divine blood-in corpses no longer had any weaknesses. Whether it was the normal elemental energies of water, fire, wind, or earth, or the lightning that undead monsters feared the most, the divine blood-in corpses had a strong resistance to them. Even if they were cut in half with a single attack or their heads were blown to pieces, these attacks that could be considered fatal to living beings, and even undead creatures would find it hard to kill them. The divine blood-in corpse's undead aura had been washed away. That faint trace of spiritual god's power was enough to intimidate normal living beings. This was not a difference in strength, but rather the pressure a high-level life form had on a low-level life form. It was like an elephant looking at an ant. The second true spirit layer. It was around the second true spirit layer. Clark's pupils slightly shrank. Even in Green City, finding 18 people in the second true spirit layer as guards was a very difficult task. Not to mention the fact that these 18 divine blood-in corpses were like 18 statues. Even someone with deep strength like Clark could feel a sense of danger that he couldn't help but feel fear. These were not normal experts. Everyone, don't be surprised. These 18 fellows aren't people. They are just puppets I made when I was bored. Chu Tian had an indifferent look on his face. It was like the divine blood-in corpse was bored and took a piss and mud to make a rough product. The situation was urgent this time, so I brought them over. I thought they would be of a bit of help. The divine blood-in corpses were still in corpses in the end. They could not give birth to life. Therefore, in corpses, especially the in corpses refined into puppets, had no life force, no ability to think, and even their souls had been refined. Therefore, they could be transported in the space warehouse. All right, there's no time to lose. We'll immediately set off. Clark did not have time to ask. We'll split into 4 groups, and each group will be divided into 10 small groups. We'll attack along the following routes. Clark began to closely arrange it. 100,000 people was a very large number. It was impossible for this large group to spread out in the forest, so they could only split into different groups to attack at the same time. When the sun rises, the undead will be weakened to a certain degree. We'll send these fellows back to the embrace of the Nether God. All right, kill, kill. Everyone's morale was high. This battle was not only important to Green City, It also had a large meaning to Chu Tian. Chu Tian lacked a chance for the entire city to acknowledge him. Let's go. At the break of dawn, the Green City army of 100,000 set off. They split into several small groups and entered the forest as fast as they could, heading in the direction of the valley. These 100,000 people were natives of the Forest of Chaos, so they couldn't charge at each other in the forest like they did on the plains. However, when the army was split into countless small teams, they could move through the forest at high speeds, but they could maintain a high fighting state. Like this, even if there was a sudden change, they wouldn't be defeated like a mountain collapsing. Dolores turned around and shouted at Chu Tian, "The withered forest is in front of us." Chu Tian nodded. "Be careful." The withered forest was the first forest to be contaminated by the death energy. The entire forest was soaked in a thick death energy, and there were no signs of any living creatures. Hundreds of thousands of indigenous people had died here, and it had become a tourist spot for living creatures. The little fox called out a few times. "Pay attention. There are large amounts of undead creatures in front of us." Almost at the same time, warnings came from all around them. Following this was a low roar like that of a wild beast as countless gargoyles fell from the sky, charging at their prey like eagles. "This is bad. It's the gargoyles." The undead religion's undead puppets were very hard to deal with, not to mention the fact that each gargoyle was carrying a necromancer on its back. When the gargoyles charged down, pitiful cries came from all directions in the forest. This kind of sudden and fierce attack had clearly caught everyone off guard. After the first round of attacks, there were heavy footsteps coming from the ground. 5 abominations led over 10,000 corpse eaters and countless zombies, densely covering the forest. They seemed like they had been waiting for a long time. There were many of them, forming a large defensive line that was used to cushion Green City's attacks. "Fuck!" Arnold roared out. "Why are there so many undead? Kill them for me." Chapter 859. The undead religion believed in the death god and the nether god. This was a very religious and mysterious sect. The ancient sects of the 10,000 ancient corpses ruins were similar to the undead religion. The only difference was whether they had faith or not. No matter what, this kind of cultivator that dealt with corpses, most people would stay away from them. When Green City was still prosperous in the past, the Lich had brought a large group of necromancers to Green City. They controlled tens of thousands of corpses. They were simply laborers that would never tire out. They had made great contributions to the gnomes, building a city in the mountain range. It was because of this that the gnomes allowed the undead religion to build a temple to increase their followers. Who would have thought that after these years, the undead religion would become stronger and stronger, even faintly threatening the gnomes? Especially the plague outbreak this time. This was clearly the work of the undead religion. Clark led the gnomes to surround the undead temple so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The necropolis was a gray castle with a pointed arch. Many gargoyles were squatting around the castle like statues. They looked like decorations, but they were actually dangerous monsters of death. There were several circles of green protectors surrounding the castle at this time. Several thousand gnome elites were surrounding the entrance of the undead religion temple, currently confronting the necromancers. Both sides were ready to fight at any moment. Clark's face was filled with anger. "Samuel, do you really have to become enemies with Green City?" Hey. The leader of the necromancers gave a cold laugh. "Clark, Green City is no longer the gnomes. You should be very clear on this point. Even if we become enemies with Green City, what does it have to do with you? Have that turtle-like city lord come out. I really want to see what kind of person he is, actually making you gnomes shamelessly send a city to bow down to him." This person's words were very harsh. Chu Tian's brows jumped up as he revealed a look of dissatisfaction. Dolores whispered in his ear in a serious voice, "Samuel, an important priest of the undead religion temple. His strength isn't bad, around the 3rd true spirit layer. He could be ranked in the top 5 of the necromancers here." "Then why isn't he a lich?" Samuel was not a lich. Rather, he was a living person. Only his body was covered in bandages, and he was wearing a giant cloak, making it hard for people to see his appearance, so they couldn't tell what race he was. Do you think every necromancer is a lich? Dolores rolled her eyes in annoyance. The lich transformation is one of the top ceremonies of the undead religion. Only the most outstanding and powerful people have the qualifications to do it. However, people with these qualifications don't have physiques suitable for turning into a lich. In the entire green religion, there is only one lich, the founder. It's said that he is an old monster that has lived for over 2,000 years, even older than the old elves in the eternal forest. An inferior existence like a lich is worthy of this kind of praise. Chu Tian curled his lips in disdain. Your way of thinking is very hard to understand. Hey, what are you saying? Who doesn't envy a lich? Dolores refuted. A lich is immortal. Living forever is something many people yearn for. There are many rulers of the continent that wish to become an immortal lich, so I don't believe you don't want to live forever. The lich in people's hearts was a very mysterious existence. This kind of undead monster was formed from a living being through a ceremony, so in theory, a lich could exist forever. Your way of thinking is completely wrong. Chu Tian softly said, don't think that a lich is that good. They don't breathe, they don't have a heartbeat, they don't have senses, they don't need to eat, and they don't need to reproduce. They are deprived of all the pleasures of life in exchange for an immortal body. So what meaning is there in that? They couldn't taste good food, they couldn't appreciate beauties, they couldn't enjoy the pleasure between men and women, and they couldn't appreciate the beauty of the world with their eyes. It was better to just die. You can't deny the benefits of being a lich. A lich is indeed almost immortal, but it's only almost. It's not truly immortal. What? Could it be that a lich can still die? A lich has an unlimited lifespan in theory, and there are some strong lich that can extract their soul to make a phylactery. That way, even if their body is destroyed, they can still be reborn through the phylactery. However, a lich's existence is not eternal. A lich can escape the aging and destruction of their body, but they cannot escape the aging of their soul. There were many living beings and non-living beings in this world that were said to be immortal, like the flower fairies that Chu Tian met. These beings did not have an upper limit in theory, but the flower fairies were more fragile than most beings. They were very dependent on their environment, and if their environment was destroyed, it was hard for the flower fairies to survive. A living being's body, spirit, and soul were all interdependent. Matter determined will and will determine soul. Without matter, the will would gradually become dull and finally lose its humanity, even losing its sense of self. The soul would also die in this process. Once a living being became a lich, they had to use a secret method to simulate and maintain their emotions. However, this method could not be maintained forever. After living for 1,000 or 2,000 years, most liches would become numb to their emotions. Their wills would become colder and colder, and eventually, they would completely lose their humanity and self-awareness. Their instincts would weaken, and they would eventually become undead. Chu Tian knew how to transform a lich, but he had no interest in this monster at all. These words attracted the attention of the surrounding people, and even the people from the Necromancer Temple looked over. Acting City Lord. The Acting City Lord is here. The gnomes discussed among themselves as they looked at the young human with strange gazes. Most of them were filled with doubt and distrust. Letting a human become the city lord was a hard thing for the gnomes to accept. The plague in Green City had been very serious recently, and this so-called acting city lord had only appeared now. This was a bit unreasonable. I was wondering who it was that dared to talk about the Great Sir Lich. Samuel looked at Chu Tian with eyes filled with mockery and anger. Are the gnomes in a desperate situation? This kind of useless human can become the city lord? It wouldn't be strange for this city to be destroyed. Dolores immediately asked, You're saying that you admit everything was caused by the necromancers? You still don't understand? This isn't important and isn't the main point. Samuel's eyes were filled with mockery. Those tens of thousands of gnomes infected by the plague, they won't live past 2 days. This is the main point. You're going too far. The gnomes were enraged. This matter was 100% the work of the necromancers. Samuel definitely had a reason for being this arrogant. That damn lich didn't show himself. So what use was there in killing these necromancer priests? The gnomes still couldn't solve the situation in front of them. Not to mention that tens of thousands of their clansmen were infected, which was equal to tens of thousands of hostages in their hands. The gnomes couldn't ignore their clansmen, so they were bound to be threatened by these despicable necromancers. No matter what, they had to save their clansmen first. Clark couldn't help loudly asking, "What conditions do you have? Speak." If the gnomes really want their clansmen to live, it's very simple. Give up the city lord position and let the great lich rule Green City. Otherwise, this small plague will just be the beginning. In your dreams, is the lich fit to rule Green City? A waste human can be your city lord, but the noble and knowledgeable Sir Lich can't? Clark, please understand this. I'm not joking with you. Think about the tens of thousands of clansmen struggling in pain. I swear that other than us necromancers, no one else has a way. Samuel pointed at Chu Tian. Of course, you have another choice. That is to kill this human and send his head to the eternal forest. Then you can rely on the Dragon's Ridge and be loyal to the Dragon's Ridge. Like this, you gnomes will still be the masters of the city. The undead religion will not only not be enemies with your green religion, they will also become your strong allies. It was impossible for the lich to sit on the city lord's throne. It wasn't like the necromancer priests didn't know this. Samuel had purposely made this request to pave the way for the second request. Kill Chu Tian. Cut off relations with the eternal forest. This was what the Dragon's Ridge wanted to see. The several tens of thousands of gnomes' lives were in the hands of the necromancers, so this shouldn't be a hard choice. After all, the gnomes did not like humans, so why would they give up their clansmen's lives for a trivial human? You should know the stubborn nature of the eternal forest people. Samuel added oil to the fire as he said, I think the Elven King not sending people to take over Green City is not because he doesn't care about Green City, but rather because he has no other choice. The elves do not like to be embroiled in disputes, and you choosing to rely on the eternal forest was wrong from the start. Now in front of you is a chance to correct your mistake. He pulled out the netherworld sword with a schwa sound. I think you've spoken a bit too much nonsense. Chu Tian raised his sword as he walked out. Do you want father to die that much? Then this Master Chu Tian will give you a chance. I'm standing right here, so kill me if you have the skills. Samuel said with a cold smile. You want me to make a move? Chu Tian laughed. If it wasn't for you being too annoying, I wouldn't even bother dirtying my sword. A wave of anger surged out of Samuel's body. He extended a withered twig-like finger and chanted. Suddenly, a strong stench of rotting flesh filled the surroundings, and a dark green fireball quickly expanded at the tip of his finger. Overestimating yourself, human. I'll let you see the might of the baleful corpse flame. This green fireball filled with corpse stench landed at Chu Tian's feet. That strong smell that could make people want to vomit instantly spread out in all directions, making everyone else involuntarily move back. The green flames suddenly soared into the sky. Chu Tian did not make any movements and was instantly submerged by the flames. Dolores was shocked. It can't be. That fellow actually couldn't resist at all? The gnomes were also stunned. Although they knew that this acting city lord wasn't strong, they never thought he would be this weak. He didn't even have a chance to resist. Samuel said with a cold smile, truly a joke. Who would have thought that at this time, a figure would walk out of the sea of flames? The raging flames had completely swallowed his body, and no one could feel any energy fluctuations coming from Chu Tian's body. What was strange was that the flames passed through his body, but they didn't cause any injuries. Not a single hair or a single corner of his body was injured. What happened? Everyone revealed looks of shock. Some people found a very strange phenomenon. Chu Tian's pitch-black eyes had turned white at this moment, and his aura had completely disappeared. He was standing here on the surface. No one could feel his existence. Chapter 860. Chief Arnold released his spirit energy and the energy turned into the shape of an incomparably strong bull. The Minotaur race's source spirit was made of different bulls, and Arnold's source spirit was the Golden Barbarian Bull King. The Golden Barbarian Bull King was a very powerful demon beast. This source spirit could not only increase one's strength, defense, and explosive power. The most important thing was that the Golden Barbarian Bull King was a dual-attributed demon beast. Not only did it have an earth-attributed attack and defense, it also had a rare spiritual energy. In the legends, the Golden Barbarian Bull King used its gaze to kill its prey. This ability was called the Death Gaze. Of course, in essence, this was a very strong spiritual attack. Arnold's source spirit was the Golden Barbarian Bull King, so he had the Golden Barbarian Bull King's innate talent. It was a pity that spiritual attacks were useless against undead. This kind of monster could only be completely crushed and completely destroyed. When Arnold gave the order, the several hundred elite Minotaur clansmen released their source spirits at the same time. They were all incomparably strong bulls, and their source spirits cover their bodies, making the Minotaurs look like several hundred giant bulls digging the ground. That low roar that shook the forest immediately spread across the entire forest. Several hundred of them wildly charged forward. The earth shook and the forest trembled. The Minotaurs relied on their powerful bodies to charge forward, destroying everything in their path. Whether it was trees or rocks, they were all shattered. They were incredibly fast, and the zombies and corpse eaters in front of them did not have time to react. They could only see hundreds of different colored Minotaurs turn into hundreds of shock waves as they charged forward, creating large fissures in the forest. Their bones were shattered and their bodies were torn apart. These zombies and ghouls were as weak as paper in front of the Minotaurs. They were sent flying or trampled one by one. The Minotaur's powerful charge was displayed without a doubt at this moment. Chu Tian was very shocked. These bulls actually have this kind of strength? Although Arnold doesn't have any brains, his battle strength is not bad. Dolores had to admit this point. The Minotaur's charge created a large impact, and the undead army's main force quickly focused their attention here. There were at least 20-30 necromancers riding gargoyles and several dozen gargoyles, blocking the charging Minotaurs. The Minotaurs were strong, but they were still made of flesh and blood. No matter how strong the necromancers were, they would still turn into a pile of rotten meat in an instant. But when the necromancers condensed all kinds of undead techniques to attack, Clark and several gnome priests riding hippogriffs flew over. The necromancers could only send the attacks they were prepared for the Minotaurs at the Green Religion priests. The gnome's power came from the forest god. This was a kind of pure life energy. It was the complete opposite of the undead religion's energy. Clark and the others had already prepared several layers of defenses on their bodies, making them low-key from the necromancer's attacks. Overconfident gnomes. Kill them. The gnomes and the necromancers began to fight in the air. The gnomes' hippogriffs could not defeat the gargoyles, not to mention the gargoyles had the advantage in numbers. Both sides had just exchanged a few moves before the gnomes fell into a disadvantage. The necromancer priest sent a petrifying beam at the gnomes' hippogriffs. That strong curse power instantly turned living creatures into statues. The gnomes quickly jumped off their mounts and shot a green arrow into the air. The gargoyles flapped their wings, and the life energy arrow was sent flying. Go die. The gargoyles the necromancer priest was sitting on turned into a purple and black shadow as they charged forward. When they were about to smash the gnome's head to pieces, a crow suddenly came out of nowhere and entered the necromancer priest's chest. The necromancer priest shouted out in fear, "Shaman witchcraft!" The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Countless crows came out of the necromancer priest's chest and mouth, instantly turning the necromancer into minced meat. It turned out that the shaman sorcerer was riding a bat into the battle. The shaman witchcraft was basically useless against the undead, but for the necromancer controlling the gargoyles, it was a very dangerous power. A necromancer priest angrily roared, "That waste Mars really can't do anything right. He actually has this many traitors under him." Luz was riding on the back of a giant witchcraft bat. Without saying a single word, he suddenly released a large amount of colorful poisonous insects that were like a rainbow-colored cloud, quickly filling the surroundings. These were the witchcraft techniques of the shaman sorcerers. Although the gargoyles were not afraid, the necromancers were living people, and they were clear on the shaman's methods. This kind of ability was hard to defend against, so they did not dare approach. The gnome used arrows to shoot down the gargoyles one by one. At this time, the battle in the forest had entered an intense stage. The undead army had clearly been refined recently. They were locals that lived in this area, but because they were polluted by large amounts of death energy, they became undead creatures. These undead creatures were not much stronger than when they were alive, and they did not have any intelligence. It was impossible for the cultivation techniques and martial skills they had when they were alive to be preserved. With just the normal zombies and ghouls, they could not stop the Green City army. But at this time, 5 abominations charged forward. These 5 abominations could not compare to the one that was killed in Green City yesterday. But they were all around the 4th true spirit layer. Now that there were 5 of them, it was a very large scene. The necromancers controlled large amounts of gargoyles, ghouls, and zombies. They were all centered around the 5 abominations, forming 5 battle groups. This was because the abominations could release a highly poisonous death mist. This poison mist was very lethal to living beings, but it did no harm to the undead creatures covered by the poison mist. This made it much harder to deal with them. Dolores knit her brows. Demonic god followers, it's time for us to make a move. Several hundred demonic god summoners began to use their summoning techniques, and several hundred spirit-form demon beasts appeared in front of them. Although the spirit-form demon beasts' abilities were greatly weakened, they were not afraid of normal attacks. Therefore, they could charge to the front and were not afraid of the poison mist. There weren't enough summoners. Perhaps they couldn't stop them for long. When the battle was in full swing, there was another change. There was an explosion coming from the distance, and large amounts of dark red clouds that were like a sticky substance poured into the sky. An incomparably large source energy array appeared in the sky. The source energy array was very large. It almost covered the entire sky. This is bad. The Lich was speeding up, most likely wanting to complete the ceremony ahead of time. This source energy array was not at its peak, but with its current strength, it was more than enough to destroy Green City. This is bad. There are too many undead in front of us. With the abominations guarding them, our main force can't charge through. The dark red clouds spread across the sky like a tide, and some of them were heading towards the forest where the battle was taking place. Everyone could feel the terrifying energy contained in the dark clouds, but they could only watch as it approached. A large sound rang out. A bolt of black lightning fell from the clouds. The thunderbolts struck the spiritual beasts, and with a single strike, dozens of spiritual beasts were annihilated. This was just the beginning. More and more black thunderbolts continued to fall, and each of them contained an extremely strong power of death. If they struck a living being, they would instantly turn that living being into an undead spirit. If they struck an undead creature, it would be as if they were injected with stimulants, causing their strength to skyrocket. Dolores's expression became uglier and uglier. This is bad. We'll most likely lose if we keep fighting like this. Chu Tian shook his head and said, "It's really useless. Let me do it. Fox, I'll watch you first." The little fox jumped out and turned into a mass of gray mist, appearing several hundred meters in the air. Then it teleported several times and instantly charged into the dark clouds that covered their heads. The little fox's snow-white body was negligible in front of the giant energy cloud, but with just a gentle breath, it created the effect of all rivers flowing into the sea, causing the incomparably dense energy cloud to change shape. All of it surged towards the little fox's body, and the lightning of death that was gathering in the dark clouds instantly disappeared. Chu Tian used the void escaping to charge through the undead. Large amounts of gargoyles and ghouls surrounded him, but they had no effect on Chu Tian. 18 figures followed behind Chu Tian, but their speed was not any slower than Chu Tian's. The 18 divine blood corpses were covered in a glow, just like 18 dark golden bronze statues. A palm came out. The gargoyles were shattered to pieces. The low-level undead were like chickens that couldn't withstand a single blow. Even if they crawled around the divine blood corpses like ants, as long as the divine blood corpses released light, it would cover all the undead within several dozen meters. Finally, they would be torn to pieces by the vast energy released by the divine blood corpses. The divine blood corpses' steps were incomparably steady, not changing at all. They were not affected by these attacks at all. Chu Tian was very satisfied with the divine blood corpses' power. This was a good chance to use it. He could test just how strong these fellows were. Chu Tian gave an order to the divine blood corpses. He left 3 divine blood corpses as guards and split the other 15 divine blood corpses into 5 groups of 3. They all had the same goal, the abomination. Chu Tian wanted to control these divine blood corpses and destroy the abomination, surrounded by tens of thousands of undead. This was an almost impossible matter. The abomination itself was a very powerful undead monster, not to mention that there were large amounts of ghouls and gargoyles protecting it. How could 3 divine blood corpses approach it? Chu Tian had a lot of confidence in the divine blood corpses. A battle puppet refined from the blood of a spiritual god. Its power could not be underestimated. Chapter 861. Samuel's corpse flame was a strange flame. This flame was born from energy and needed corpse chi to support it. Samuel had refined it over the years, and he had mixed several strong corpse poisons into it, letting it corrode a living being's body and vitality, turning a living person into a corpse. Although the power of the flame was nothing to write home about, the additional effects were enough to make people tremble in fear. Even if it was an expert with a higher cultivation base than Samuel, they wouldn't dare let themselves be covered in this flame. Not to mention a person with a lower cultivation base and not using any defensive cultivation techniques. Why was he not injured at all? Chu Tian was standing in the middle of the flame, and there was not a single hair on his body that was affected. This was a bit unbelievable and incomprehensible. Samuel shot out several more fireballs. Shwa shwa. Several fireballs hit Chu Tian's body. This time people could clearly see that the fireballs passed through Chu Tian's body, but strangely they did not touch Chu Tian. It was like they did not pass through his body, but rather air. Since they couldn't even touch him, what could these strange and sinister flames do to him? Camouflage? Spiritual illusion technique? No, he didn't feel any spiritual energy fluctuations. Samuel did not believe it. His body was covered in a ghostly aura as he raised his hands high up. His 10 skinny fingers released flames at the same time, condensing a large fireball above his head in a short period of time. This fireball was quickly compressed, turning from a dark green to a jet black color. The attack power was at least 10 times stronger than before. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. The reason he could easily deal with the previous attack was because the flames were too weak. This attack was close to Samuel's 3rd awakened soul layer strength, and Chu Tian's void escaping technique could not resist this kind of strong energy. So once he was hit, he would lose his effect. You think you could be arrogant just because you know a little strange cultivation technique? Samuel caught Chu Tian's expression. He knew that Chu Tian could not dodge this attack, so he revealed a cold and fiendish smile. How will you block this move? Go die. The black fireball roared out as it charged over. Chu Tian did not dodge. His skin and his body suddenly lit up with starlight. The light was so strong that he turned into a person made of light. He opened his arms like he was hugging a friend, casually hugging it. He's seeking death. How could Samuel's corpse flame be touched by a mortal? The necromancers revealed an expression like they were looking at a fool, and the gnomes revealed looks of shock. Could it be that the human didn't feel that the fatal part of the flame was not the flame itself, but rather the poison and curse inside? What was the difference between charging in like this and a moth flying into a flame? Pucci. the sound of fire and water colliding. The fireball in Chu Tian's chest continued to shrink. The sinister corpse chi and corpse poison energy could not pass through the light on his body to harm Chu Tian at all. Rather, it was completely blocked outside and was finally destroyed by the power of the sacred light. Everyone was shocked once again. He was still unharmed. How did this human do this? There weren't many people in Green City that could calmly block Samuel's attack. Actually, this was one of the effects of the sacred light body. Not only did the sacred light body have a strong defense, it also had a strong resistance to this kind of dark death energy. It could even be said that it completely countered it. Samuel finally understood. The people sent by the Eternal Forest were not ordinary people. This kind of defensive ability could make him an outstanding talent in Green City. If he wasn't careful in dealing with this kind of opponent, perhaps there would be endless troubles. Chu Tian raised his sword and turned into a burning sword chi that swept out. Large amounts of dark gray energy came out of Samuel's cloak. It was like several hundred wandering spirits surrounded his body, forming a layer of defense. Chu Tian's sword chi hit it, but it could not harm Samuel at all. "You're only a so-so." When Samuel's voice was halfway through, Chu Tian suddenly turned into a blur and disappeared. This speed was so fast that even Samuel, who was in the rank 3 true spirit, could not react to it. In an instant, more than 10 extremely fast sword lights passed through Samuel's body like threads. One after another, beautiful sword lights shot out. The Een souls that were protecting his body were instantly scattered, and a large portion of them were evaporated by the Netherworld Flame's power. Samuel was completely enraged. "Great Nether God, please open the gates of hell and release the power of the dead into the world." A large amount of ink like black fog appeared around the necromancer priest. This spirit energy condensed into a fierce skeleton image. This was the necromancer's source spirit. When an incomparably strong death aura spread out, it was like a drop of ink on a piece of paper. Wherever it spread, it would be coated in a layer of black. The green grass around him turned into obsidian before shattering like fragile glass. Chu Tian quickly dodged. With this kind of attack, even he did not dare take it head-on. The spirit energy aura released by his source spirit. There was no life within 15 meters of Samuel. Countless strands of energy floated in the air, and with Samuel chanting an incantation, they all condensed back into a solid form. 10,000 ghosts seeking life. Samuel's elemental energy transformed into thousands of skulls. There were ghostly wails and wolf howls coming from all directions. This was a spiritual attack that made the gnomes' expressions change as they moved back even further. These skulls had fierce expressions, and their hair was disheveled. Once they were summoned, they immediately locked onto Chu Tian. They were like sharks smelling blood, charging forward to suck his flesh and blood dry. They were not illusions. Each skull was a weapon refined by the necromancer's vengeful spirits. They were monsters with form but no substance, so even if they were broken by normal methods, there would be no effect at all. They would reform in a few seconds, so it would be a waste of energy. Once the skull fell on a person's body, the consequences would be unimaginable. These vengeful spirits would enter the target's body and use the curse and death energy to corrode the body. Then it would corrode the mind and soul, finally draining the flesh and soul. This was a very high-level move of the necromancers. This move was not over yet. The second move was released. Samuel controlled the thick ghosts and black fog around him and quickly condensed them on the surface of his body, finally forming a set of sturdy and ferocious armor. Samuel's original appearance could no longer be seen. He had almost turned into a skeleton general with a height of nearly 3 meters and 2 black bone spears in his hands. His body was covered in runes. The 2 black bone spears were filled with a strong death aura. Every movement he made stirred up a storm of ghosts. That bone-chilling cold that seemed like it could freeze a person's soul. It was enough to make it hard for people to breathe, not to mention moving or resisting. "I want to see what you'll use to fight me." Samuel's voice became wild and terrifying just like several hundred hoarse voices overlapping together. It was like a ghost coming for their lives, making people tremble in fear. Then come. The black demon god soared into the sky. Chu Tian did not hide his strength anymore. He released his source spirit, and a wild, destructive energy filled the surroundings, instantly shattering all the skulls near him. This was not just shattering them, it was also destroying their roots, making it impossible for them to heal. No matter how many skulls hit it, they were shattered by the demon god's sword 3 feet away. Chu Tian's figure paused, and the raging flames on the blade spread to his body. In an instant, they covered Chu Tian's entire body, making him look like a flaming demon. A skeleton general, a flame demon. Both sides charged at each other at the same time. Everyone could clearly feel that Chu Tian had fused with the weapon spirit and fused with the weapon, instantly increasing his strength by several times, completely overshadowing Samuel. A sword glow soared into the sky. Ha! The 2 spears of death were cleanly cut into pieces. The sword beam still maintained its power and bombarded Samuel's body. The skeleton armor formed by ghosts and death energy completely exploded, and Samuel's body was thrown high into the air. One attack. Chu Tian only used one attack. Clean and direct. Without any tricks, he used a single attack to crush Samuel. Chu Tian's figure flickered, and his flame body split into 8, shooting out like meteors. They were evenly distributed in 8 directions around Samuel, and the sword glows in each figure's hand became incomparably dazzling, condensing a terrifying power. "No, you can't kill me," Samuel angrily roared as he struggled. "Otherwise, tens of thousands of people will be buried with you." Clark's expression also changed. He didn't have a way to save his clansmen yet, so if he killed this fellow now, it would be impossible to stop. He did not have a chance to stop him at all. Chu Tian's attacks were too fast, and the 8 figures moved at the same time, all using the netherworld flickering flame slash. Each figure sent out at least 30 sword glows. In half a blink of an eye, the 8 figures had unleashed more than 200 sword lights. The entire field of vision was filled with a storm of blue sword glows. It was like a beautiful explosion of fireworks blooming in the sky. Under the cover of the sword glows, everyone's eyes opened. The momentum of this attack was very strong. In the center of this incomparable storm of sword chi, anything would be instantly turned to dust. Finally, it would be swallowed by the wild netherworld flames, not leaving a single bit behind. The sword glows disappeared as quickly as they appeared. It was like a flash in the pan, stunning people and making them feel pity. When the storm of sword glows disappeared from the sky, Chu Tian slowly fell to the ground, and the flames slowly disappeared from his body. He spat out in disdain. "You want to kill me with this little bit of skill? I think the necromancer priest's methods are only so." The entire scene was filled with a deathly silence. The gnomes were all stunned. Who said this human was weak? He was clearly strong enough to make people's hair stand on end. A human who wasn't even 20 years old was at the peak of his potential. If he was given another 30 to 50 years, what kind of level would he grow to? You killed Samuel." The other necromancers reacted after a few seconds. Anger, shock, and fear filled their hearts at the same time. "Not only did I kill him, I also want to kill you all." Chapter 862. The little fox's aura swallowing the mountains and rivers stopped the powerful energy cloud from spreading, completely shocking the necromancers. This energy came from the ruins, and it was incomparably pure. Unless it was an expert on the level of the Elven King, it was impossible for them to resist it. How did this little life form do this? The amount of energy that he had just absorbed was enough to create an army of undead. At this time, the divine blood-in corpses ran faster and faster, and the light they released became brighter and brighter. The energy flowing out of their bodies tightly wrapped around their bodies, turning them into glowing balls. With an unstoppable momentum, they directly crushed the undead monsters. That's right, it was a crushing. even if it was just a little bit. The undead instantly exploded into powder. The divine blood in corpse's charge was 10 times stronger than the Minotaur's. Even if there was an army in front of them, they would be like 10 million ants. They could just step over them, looking down on everything. Pressing forward, the gargoyles kept sending out all kinds of curses, hoping to slow it down, but these attacks had no effect on the divine blood-eaten corpses. The loathsome evil seemed to have felt a sense of danger and immediately let out a deep roar. It awakened a powerful death energy from within its body. In the end, it quickly surged out of its body in the form of a shockwave. The energy flow that was like a tsunami overflowed in all directions. Everything in the surroundings was quickly petrified and turned into obsidian without any signs of life. It was this move again. The 3 divine blood-eaten corpses were less than 5 meters away from the attack. The energy that was like a ball of light covering the eaten corpses was like a snowball in boiling water, melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. That jet-black energy continued to erode the center of the eaten corpses. The necromancer priest let out a sigh of relief. These fellows were indeed a bit strange, but their strength didn't seem to be as strong as he had imagined. The abomination's high purity and concentration of death energy erupted in a single breath. This kind of high-speed energy flow could directly envelop and seep into the surrounding matter, changing it from the very core, which was why it could erase any existence. The energy on the surface of the divine blood-eaten corpses was not strong enough, so the high-speed energy shot through this energy and landed on their bodies. Without any protection, it was impossible for them to block this kind of attack, and they would instantly turn into 3 black obsidian statues. As expected, the moment the divine blood-eaten corpse's protective energy was completely corroded, the black energy wildly sprayed on their bodies like paint. The divine blood-eaten corpses were covered in a layer of black from head to toe, and it was glossy, releasing the color of obsidian. They were killed? They were only like this. Dolores knit her brows in confusion, but while everyone was shocked and the necromancer was taunting them, she found that Chu Tian had a deep smile on his face. What followed was a shocking scene. The 3 figures that had clearly turned into black obsidian statues still moved forward, maintaining their speed. They charged at the abomination from 3 different angles, and 3 fists landed on the abomination's body at the same time. Everyone could clearly see that the black marks on the divine blood-eaten corpses were quickly fading. It wasn't fading, the energy didn't disappear, it was just leaving the body. From every corner of the body, it all went to the right arm and finally gathered in the fist. It condensed into a small piece that was sent back to the abomination's body. The 3 fists landed on the abomination's body, and the energy released instantly petrified the abomination's body before exploding. The abomination fell to the ground, and a third of its body disappeared. The abomination's power did not harm the divine blood-eaten corpses. This power was absorbed by the divine blood-eaten corpses and used by the divine blood-eaten corpses to send a punch back at the abomination. This kind of attack method was unheard of. Don't think that the abomination is that easy to defeat. The necromancer priest quickly controlled the abomination. Ignorant people, I'll let you see the true power of the abomination. The abomination was an undead creature. It couldn't even be considered a normal undead creature because the abomination did not have a soul flame. It was just a mixture of flesh and energy, so it did not have any weaknesses. Even if it was cut into pieces, it would not die. Roar! The loathsome evil let out a deafening roar, and its body continued to tear apart. It quickly opened its countless mouths, and countless long things that looked like blood vessels and tentacles exploded out, like fireworks exploding in all directions. They were faster and sharper than arrows, and they stabbed into the bodies of the ghouls one by one. The ghouls let out painful howls as their originally strong bodies withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Large amounts of flesh and blood were sucked out, finally turning into a bag of bones that fell to the ground. The abomination instantly recovered large amounts of flesh and energy. The missing parts of its body were replenished, and the red, tentacle-like things were still wandering around its body, stabbing into the ghouls' bodies and devouring the surrounding ghouls as if they were hungry and thirsty. In just a few seconds, 100 ghouls had been eaten by the abomination. The abomination looked even larger and stronger, becoming even more ferocious and terrifying. This kind of undead monster was not an existence that could be measured with common sense. It was a monster made of flesh and energy with the undead religion's secret technique. Therefore, as long as the secret technique on its body was not broken, it could not be killed. The abomination was more tenacious than any undead creature. Hey, how about it? The necromancer priest rode on the back of the gargoyle and looked down with a victorious attitude. The abomination cannot die. It can swallow all flesh and blood. As long as there are materials, it can recover at any time. Even if you have heaven-defying skills, don't think you can defeat the abomination in this kind of environment. This kind of terrifying scene did not make Chu Tian's expression change at all. He just revealed a taunting and disdainful smile as the three corpses charged at the abomination again. Seeking death, the abomination's arms split open and a black bone blade came out. It sent out 2 slashes from the left and right, and the blade glow sent the divine blood corpses flying. The 2 attacks were too strong, and the divine blood corpses did not have any protection at all. They used their flesh to block the attack and were split in half. The last divine blood corpse charged at the abomination. The abomination's large belly suddenly split open, and it was like a giant mouth. It was filled with rotten flesh and dense teeth, making people's scalps go numb just looking at it. The abomination did not give the divine blood corpses any chance to escape. The tentacles on its body shot out at the same time and tightly wrapped around the divine blood corpses before throwing them into its giant mouth. The large mouth closed. The belly closed. The abomination's fat belly moved, just like a large mouth chewing food. There was the sound of flesh and bone being crushed, and a person was swallowed like this. Or it could be said that they were stuffed into its stomach. Moreover, with the abomination's strength, even if it was a piece of refined iron, it would still be instantly disintegrated. The necromancer priest said with a cold smile, "This kind of thing is only fit to be a snack for the abomination." Chu Tian smiled without saying a word. "I'm afraid your teeth aren't good enough. The consequences of eating something bad will be very serious." When Chu Tian spoke, the 2 corpses that had been split in half did not have a single drop of blood coming out. They were like 2 magnets that attracted each other and stood up again. Their clothes had already been destroyed, and they were completely naked. The divine blood corpses had been refined for a long time, so their outer appearances had changed greatly. From head to toe, there were no signs of gender. There was no hair, no pores, and the dark golden skin that seemed to be cast from gold and copper was covered in dense runes. Both of his eyes were open, but there was nothing in his eye sockets, only a scarlet radiance radiating from them. What is this? Everyone was stunned by this undead that didn't seem like an undead, a living being that didn't seem like a living being. Being split in half from head to toe, the giants instantly healed. Could it be that they wouldn't die? At this moment, the loathsome evil's body began to convulse, making a sound similar to boiling water. Its originally huge and malevolent body suddenly became irregular, like a piece of wax that was rapidly melting under high temperature. Pieces of rotten flesh fell off, and the loathsome evil's body swelled up. What was going on? The necromancer priest found that he could no longer control the abomination. The abomination's body seemed to be filled with a kind of energy that was like a terrifying virus that kept seeping into every corner of the abomination's body. It made the abomination lose control of its body structure, so it began to collapse at an unbelievable speed. The abomination completely exploded. The energy in its body was released at once, which was equivalent to an explosion. Although it couldn't compare to the explosion in Green City, it was still enough to cover several hundred meters. All the ghouls, gargoyles, and zombies in this area, as well as the necromancers that couldn't escape in time, were all killed. The divine blood corpses walked out from the center of the explosion. Its body was also heavily deformed, but its bones gave off a crackling sound as they quickly returned to their original position, finally returning to normal. The three divine blood corpses were not injured at all. The divine blood corpses dared to swallow them? The divine blood could break all curses, and it could break death energy. Not to mention a trivial abomination. Even if the bone dragon swallowed the divine blood corpses, it would still suffer. At this moment, there were explosions coming from several directions. Several abominations had already been killed. Chu Tian was very pleased with this result. It really wasn't a waste to pay such a large price. These corpses had almost immortal bodies. At least with the power of the true spirit realm, it would be hard to kill them. This was the power brought by the divine blood. In the ancient god's memory crystal, these puppets were called divine servants. The divine servants were not gods, but they had a portion of the power of gods. Now the 18 divine blood corpses were about to be transformed into divine servants. Although they were not very strong, they had high growth potential. Chapter 863. Even if Samuel was not a peak expert of the undead religion, he could still be considered a top expert in Green City. With the gnome's great elder Clark personally making a move, even if he could win against Samuel, he would still have to pay a bit of a price. The necromancer priest's abilities were ruthless and cunning, catching people off guard. No one dared to underestimate this group. And now, the acting city lord that everyone looked down on. This young human that was too young to be normal. He had actually directly killed Samuel, and the entire fight was very short. He was at most in the first true spirit layer, skipping 2 levels and paying no price to kill the third true spirit layer pre-Samuel. This could not be described as a genius. This human surpassed common sense and was a completely monstrous existence. The several thousand gnomes had seen the fight. The human sent by the Elven King was not trash. Although this kind of strength didn't count for much in the Eternal Forest, in terms of battle strength, he was at least in the top 10 in Green City. Not to mention that he was still this young, he might not be inferior to those old fellows in the Eternal Forest in the future. Shua. Chu Tian did not stop. People still had not recovered from their shock. Chu Tian had already charged over with an endless might, turning into a sword glow that swept past several necromancers. Several bodies were cut apart by the sword glow without any resistance, and the netherworld flames instantly swallowed their bodies. Kill him. The necromancer priest roared out in a flustered and exasperated manner. Chu Tian's eyes turned white again, and the space around him trembled. He took a step forward and instantly disappeared, moving to the center of the necromancers. Spatial movement? Damn! A giant sword glow swept out. Several dozen necromancers were sent flying like butterflies with their bodies burning in flames. The necromancer temple was guarded by the church's elites, but Chu Tian had been cut down like vegetables. Several necromancer priests quickly chanted an incantation, and the motionless gargoyles that were crouching like statues on top of the temple all came to life at this moment. One by one, they flapped their wings and suddenly rushed towards Chu Tian. The gargoyles were puppets refined by the necromancers, similar to the shaman's voodoo puppets and the Green Country's protectors. Each gargoyle was not inferior to a 9th awakened soul layer demon beast, and their bodies were engraved with death arrays and curses. Even if they fought with opponents of the same level, they would still be at a disadvantage. 300 gargoyles were awakened, and they instantly formed a very terrifying battle strength. The 300 gargoyles opened their wings and released a gray light that instantly covered a large area. Everything that was covered in the light was corroded by a strong curse power, instantly turning into gray stone. Petrification curse. This was a kind of curse power that could directly turn living beings into stone. Chu Tian was not affected at all as he quickly passed through the light. He swung his sword and cut down several necromancers. The other necromancers had already been pushed back, and they quickly made a move to resist. The graveyard around the temple was dug open and zombies covered in stitches were awakened. It was like there were springs in their bodies as they suddenly shot out from the ground. These stitched-up puppets were all zombies transformed from corpses. Although their bodies were stiff and slow, they were filled with various poisons and curses. Each of them had shocking close-range attacks. Although they were not as agile and fierce as the gargoyles, there were over 1,000 of them. Chu Tian ignored the dense amount of zombies in front of him and raised his sword to cut a necromancer in half. These were cultivators that controlled the power of death. These terrifying undead monsters. He treated them like grass. There were several hundred necromancers and over 1,000 undead monsters, but they couldn't stop Chu Tian at all. Kill him. Quickly kill him. The gargoyles released a purple and black energy, and 2 bolts of lightning shot out from both sides, roaring as they slammed into Chu Tian. In the end, the gargoyles did not hit Chu Tian. Rather, they passed through Chu Tian's body and hit each other. Pung! The 2 gargoyles exploded like cotton shreds. The undead zombies spat out fireballs, wind blades, icicles, poison arrows, and poison darts. Chu Tian kept dodging, escaping from the concentrated attacks. The other attacks all passed through him, as if they were hitting air, unable to harm Chu Tian at all. Chu Tian used the void escaping technique on one hand, and his body was covered in light on the other. Even if the necromancers occasionally broke through the void escaping technique with the sacred light body's defense, the curses, weakening, and corrosion could not affect Chu Tian at all. The various energy attacks could not harm Chu Tian at all. Kill, advance, kill again, advance again. Chu Tian relied on a single sword to forcefully cut a path through, slashing back and forth once more. That momentum was like a hot knife through butter. Several necromancers that were not weak were cut down by his sword, including 2 necromancer priests. The gargoyles had destroyed several dozen, and the zombies had been cut down over 100, but Chu Tian was not injured from start to finish. Not to mention the necromancers. The gnomes were shocked. Was this fellow even human? They had never seen a person that could easily move through the concentrated attacks. Not even a single hair was injured. Instead, they were completely defeated, unable to resist at all. A gnome hesitantly asked, "Great Elder, the necromancers have all been killed, perhaps our clansmen. There is no way to change the situation now. We can only think of another way to solve it." Clark helplessly gave the order. Make a move first and overturn the undead temple. Although they weren't injured, their spirit energy consumption was quite large. Chu Tian's attacks gradually weakened, and the gnomes finally joined the battle at this time. A single Chu Tian had sent the necromancers into chaos, and now, with this many gnomes involved, they didn't even have a chance to escape. They killed their way from the outside of the temple to the inside. Less than 40 of the several hundred necromancers were killed. They could only helplessly retreat into the temple and open a purple barrier, easing the situation a bit. "Didn't you motley crew want me dead?" Chu Tian was a bit tired, but his eyes were still incomparably terrifying, making the necromancers tremble in fear. "Now you want to kill me. Why are you like a turtle hiding in its shell?" The temple's barrier was very strong. Perhaps it couldn't be opened in a short amount of time. But it didn't matter now. It was impossible for these necromancers to escape. "Listen to me. I'll give you one last chance to live," Clark said in a deep voice. "Immediately tell us the method to save our clansmen. Otherwise, you will be turned to ashes along with the temple." "Ha ha ha." A necromancer priest broke out in laughter. "Do you really think we'll tell you? Green City is doomed to be destroyed. The gnomes are doomed to die. And this place is doomed to become a death zone. We are just entering the embrace of the Nether God first, but you will suffer eternal torture in the abyss of pain and death." These fellows were actually this wild? "Stupid human, do you really think we've lost?" The necromancer priest turned to look at the tall altar behind him. "I'll let you experience what is called true death and fear." Chu Tian revealed a surprised expression. The death shrine gave off a strange aura. A few altars and statues shattered at the same time, and a large amount of death aura sealed in them gushed out, forming a powerful death storm inside the temple. As the energy storm swept through, cracks appeared all over the shrine, and it began to shake, as if it would explode at any time. Clark's expression changed. Such a strong death energy. Do they want to explode? Quickly retreat. No, we can't retreat. This is a ceremony. Chu Tian shouted at Clark and the others. Stop them. Too late. This ceremony was even faster than Chu Tian imagined. The bodies of the dozens of surviving necromancers were shredded by the storm, and the scattered limbs of the zombies were also swept into the storm. Countless flesh fragments were brought to the center by the high-speed, rotating storm, and finally pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle, unexpectedly forming an 8-meter-tall behemoth. What is this thing? The gnomes were stunned. This 8-meter-tall behemoth was formed by the compression of hundreds of corpses. Its huge head was formed by 8 or 9 heads squeezed together. Its shoulders, chest, and abdomen were all hideous and terrifying human faces. Its limbs and torso were all pieced together from minced meat. This was a monster formed from the resentment, hatred, and power of several dozen necromancers, as well as the bodies of over 100 soldiers. It was like a giant mountain of flesh, standing in the darkness and releasing a terrifying aura. Abomination. Chu Tian's expression changed. Abomination was a high-level undead monster. Resentment, hatred, slaughter, death, and all kinds of darkness gathered together was the so-called abomination. This was a type of undead monster that was synthesized and not naturally formed. Due to the special nature of undead creatures, when a large number of undead monsters fused together, the power within their bodies would naturally form a cycle. There would never be any signs of rejection. Therefore, for cultivators that used the power of death, abominations were very useful puppets. The strength of abominations was not certain. It mainly depended on the materials used to create them. Several normal corpses could create abominations, but the abominations created like this would not be that strong. Now, there were several dozen necromancers and over 100 zombies that were not weak. This abomination formed was simply a disaster for Green City. This abomination not only gathered the power of these materials, it also knew how to use the techniques of these people. It was not something easy to deal with. Clark, the abomination, opened its mouth to speak. The several dozen mouths on its body opened their mouths at the same time. You have made a stupid choice. For this choice, you and your city will be buried in death. This voice was very heavy, and it made people's hearts tremble when they heard it. What Clark was truly afraid of was not the abomination itself, but rather the person making this sound. That's right, this was not the abomination's will because the abomination did not have a will. Someone had used a long-distance method to control the abomination's body, and now the abomination's body was being controlled by that fellow. There's no need to guess, he was 100% a lich. Chapter 864. Under the little fox's wild swallowing, the energy cloud gradually disappeared. The little fox immediately came back after completing its task, and the 18 divine servants also came back at this time. The necromancer's face turned very ugly. This was truly strange. The undead army created by the undead ruins and the energy released by the undead ruins was enough to crush Green City. But who would have thought that the undead religion would become weaker and weaker? What was going on? It was completely out of his expectations. The 5 abominations were directly killed. The energy cloud was disintegrated before it even had a chance to show its effects. Under the wild attacks of the Forest Army's elites, the undead monsters began to show signs of being pushed back. They didn't hope to destroy the other side. They just hoped to stop them here, giving the Lord Lich enough time to complete the ceremony. Once this shocking array was activated, Green City would be instantly destroyed, and the millions of people would turn into undead. No matter how the other side struggled, it would all be futile. Now the large net covering the sky was becoming larger and larger, gathering more and more energy. But this array was too large. Even if it continued like this, it would take less than half a day to complete. What could the undead army use to block it? Just relying on these tens of thousands of ghouls and zombies? We can't waste time here. Chu Tian knew that the Lich was completing the ceremony ahead of time, and this place was quite far from the valley, so he didn't have time to waste here. He loudly shouted to the others, "We'll kill our way over and kill that Lich." All right, kill our way over. Although their losses weren't small, everyone became braver as they fought. After all, this concerned the fate of the entire clan, so no one could afford to lose this battle. Chu Tian led the 18 divine servants in the lead, relying on the void escaping to protect himself. Even if he passed through an army of thousands, it would be hard for him to receive any damage. The 18 divine servants followed behind him. These puppets had shocking defenses, being immune to curses, death energy, and dark energy attacks, so they were unobstructed the entire way. Of course, the little fox's role was the most important. It could swallow the attacks coming from all directions. When a large group of undead monsters surrounded it, the little fox just needed to gently suck it in. Whether it was the gargoyles, ghouls, or other high-level undead, the soul flames of the undead monsters would be sucked out. The little fox's special ability was simply an instant kill to them. One person, one fox, and 18 puppets, they passed through tens of thousands of undead, falling to the ground wherever they went. There were so many necromancers surrounding them, but they couldn't do anything to them. Chu Tian's strength alone was enough to suppress most of the undead. How could the Green City people not be shocked? How could the undead religion not be shocked? Everyone had no choice but to be convinced by Chu Tian. If this human didn't interfere, perhaps Green City wouldn't even need to wait for the undead religion to make a move. The shamans would have destroyed Green City first, and the undead religion would have been like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. In the end, Green City would not have a good ending no matter what. In the end, this person had broken the shaman's plan. Now, he was attacking the undead religion like this. The undead couldn't hold on any longer. But at this moment, the scales of victory began to tilt. From the direction of the basin, there was a dense mass of black figures, which were tens of thousands of Een spirits. Each one had a fierce appearance and green fangs. They were the fiercest of the Een spirits, being made of strong death energy. They had form but no substance, and there were a large number of them. The Een souls let out sharp howls, and their bodies began to turn red. They fell down from the sky like meteors, and the already withered and dead forest immediately exploded into hundreds and thousands of holes. This was an indiscriminate bombardment. Whether it was the undead army or the forest army, they were all in the range of the specter bombs. The specter bombs did not release flames or normal shockwaves. Rather, it released a strong death energy and spiritual energy. This attack did little damage to the undead army, but it was very harmful to normal beings. This wave of explosions did not end. Another large group of gargoyles appeared in the sky. Each of these gargoyles was carrying a warrior covered in black armor and energy. When Chu Tian saw the appearance of these warriors, his expression changed slightly. Dread Knights? The Lich really did have some skills. He could even make these kinds of things. There weren't many Dread Knights, but there were still several hundred of them. Don't look down on several hundred Dread Knights. Their battle strength was very terrifying. If Chu Tian's guesses weren't wrong, these Dread Knights were collected by the Lich from the forest and were made from the corpses of the old chiefs of the large tribes. Those old chiefs that died of old age or accidents all had very high strength. When they were turned into Dread Knights, they could recover most of their strength from when they were alive, and they could even keep a part of their cultivation technique from when they were alive. The black heavy armor on the bodies of these high-level undead wasn't real armor, but was condensed from dark energy. The appearance of these undead basically retained the appearance of when they were alive, but their eyes were spewing soul flames, and their whole body was wrapped in a dark undead aura. Around 400-500 Dread Knights joined the battle. This was a very strong battle strength. Although a single Dread Knight could not compare to an abomination, 4 or 5 of them together were stronger than an abomination. Now that there were several hundred Dread Knights joining the battle, this was equivalent to adding in the battle strength of over 100 abominations. This would immediately put a large pressure on Green City. A Dread Knight raised a large sword and quickly attacked. If he didn't use the Netherworld Flame Sword, Chu Tian would barely be able to keep up. The large sword was covered in black energy, and it instantly sent out over 20 sword glows, all attacking different parts of Chu Tian's body. The Dread Knights were not just fast, their attacks were also very strong. With Chu Tian's void escaping, he could not block them, so he could only retreat. A sword chi swept out, and the Dread Knight raised its sword to block the Netherworld sword chi. It only retreated a few steps before stabilizing itself and chasing after Chu Tian like a shadow. The little fox did not give a chance this time. The soul flame in the Dread Knight's helmet floated a few times and leaked out of the gaps in the armor before being swallowed by the little fox. Chu Tian let out a slight sigh of relief. He was not afraid of the Dread Knights, but these fellows were too strong. If they fought, it would be endless, and Chu Tian did not have time to waste here. The forest army had not recovered from the barrage of attacks when the Dread Knights launched a round of attacks. This time the Green City and the forest locals were caught off guard, so they suffered heavy losses. The necromancers were overjoyed seeing this. The Dread Knights, with a personal guards, were fined by Sir Lich. Sir Lich must have felt that the situation was bad, so he sent his personal guards over. With the help of the Dread Knights, they could slightly reduce the pressure. This was bad. They didn't have enough troops. They hadn't even reached the valley yet. Clark revealed an anxious expression. It would be bad for Green City if they kept fighting like this, but when Clark was filled with anxiety, there was a sudden situation. Look, there's a group of demon beasts coming. In the sky above Green City, there was a large group of demon beasts that covered the sky. There were dragon hawks, twin-legged wyverns, thunderbirds, and all kinds of demon beasts. There was a total of 3,000 of them. Druids. The druids are here. These demon beasts were all transformed druids. The druids directly attacked the undead army. These powerful demon beasts had a terrifying, destructive might, and with this wild attack, the undead army that had just turned the situation around instantly fell into a disadvantageous situation. The little fox continued to jump through the Dread Knights. In just 5-6 minutes, several dozen Dread Knights had been eliminated in the forest. The druids had always been neutral. At this critical moment, they had helped Green City resolve this crisis. However, Chu Tian was not surprised by this at all. The undead religion was not targeting a city or a clan. They wanted to turn the entire area into an undead land. The druids had lived in Green City for many years. How could they tolerate this kind of thing happening? This was why they decided to help Green City. Roar! A deep dragon roar came from the sky. A green dragon that was more than 10 meters long swooped down from the sky. Scorching dragon breath sprayed out, turning the ground into a sea of fire wherever it passed. Hundreds of undead monsters were burned to ashes by the terrifying dragon breath. Prophet Yoda had made a move. This was something that had never been seen before. We are here to help, Sir City Lord. After the green dragon fiercely cleaned up the undead monsters, it landed beside Chu Tian. It lowered its giant dragon head, and a deep voice came from its mouth. Let me give you a ride. Huh. Then I'll have to trouble you. Chu Tian brought the little fox and the divine servant to stand on the green dragon's back. He forcefully waved his hand. Green citizens, follow this city lord to kill. Long live the city lord. Long live the city lord. At this moment, the other druids also brought a lot of elites. This group of people shouted as they flew through the vast forest towards the axis of the evil energy at an extremely fast speed. When they looked into the distance, they could vaguely see the basin in front of them. The entire basin was like a giant basin that was filled with dense, dark energy and death energy. There was a giant pillar of energy that pierced into the sky, like it was stirring up the entire sky. It kept sending the energy from the ground into the sky and into the giant array. Chu Tian was puzzled. Wasn't the energy in this ruin a little too strong? What kind of messy things were buried in it? But he didn't have time to think about it at this moment. Destroying this damn place was the most important thing right now. The Druids, Green Religion, Shaman Religion, Arnold, Dolores, and the other forest elites had all been in conflict with each other and had fought many times. But now they were united like never before. They were fighting against a common enemy, the undead religion. Chapter 865. The abomination had fused several dozen necromancers into its body, with around 10 of them being in the true spirit realm. To create the abomination, it had used up the power of the dead sealed in the undead temple, which was a large loss to the undead religion. But the more they paid, the more they could exchange for. This abomination's strength had reached around the 5th true spirit layer, which was already very strong and hard to resist. It had also fused with the Lich's thoughts. In other words, the one controlling the abomination's body and power was the Lich. When the abomination had a clear mind and consciousness, it could use various secret techniques and cultivation techniques, which increased the abomination's battle strength by several times. Dong, dong, dong. The abomination took incomparably heavy steps. The gnomes felt like the ground was about to collapse. The abomination's running speed was incredibly fast. It was as if even if a mountain was in front of it, it could easily smash it to pieces. This majestic aura had a very strong impact on people's minds. Sealing array. Clark and the Green Religion priests made a move in time. The ground exploded and several dozen giant wooden stakes came out of the ground. Each wooden stake had a sealing rune engraved on it, and when they were connected, they formed a source energy array. The abomination was sealed in the center of the source energy array. Countless strands of energy spread over the abomination's body, finally forming several green vines. One end was connected to the giant wooden stakes, and the other end was like an iron lock locking the abomination in the center of the source energy array. This array was very strong. Even the abomination could not easily break through it. Therefore, its body paused, and it immediately lost the ability to move. This was just the beginning. The other Green Religion priests also made a move. Countless vines continued to wrap around it, turning the abomination's giant body into a small mountain. The strength of the vine's frantic compression could even crush steel. The abomination's body was also constantly being compressed, but it wasn't crushed. This probably meant that the abomination was at least a bit tougher than steel, but almost everyone believed that no matter how strong the abomination was, it wouldn't be able to break free under this kind of restraint. Kill it, quickly. No matter how strong the abomination was, it was still an individual. The gnomes drew their bows and were about to shoot arrows. There was also a portion of gnomes that directly surrounded the abomination. At this time, they were wrapped in a giant ball that kept spitting out a gray-green poison mist. It spread very quickly, covering the abomination's body in the blink of an eye. This was the poison mist released by the abomination's body, making it so that people could not see the abomination with their naked eyes. Clark revealed a shocked expression. What was going on? Could it be that it still had the strength to resist after being sealed? Chu Tian felt a low chant coming from the abomination's mouth. This was the sound of it chanting a strange incantation, and there was a strong death energy brewing. It was too early. Don't go over. He quickly stopped the gnomes. Retreat. If people could see, the loathsome evil had already been coated with a layer of black death energy. This energy immediately spurted out from its body, and all the places that this energy spread to became the color of obsidian. The vines, the wooden stakes, the ground, the flowers, the plants, and even the air itself were all frozen, revealing a large amount of black crystals. This energy was too strong and too fast. The gnome's sealing array suppressed the aura from spreading ahead of time, making it so the gnomes did not have time to sense the danger. When they felt the giant black wave spread out, most of them did not have time to retreat and were instantly submerged. Within 150 meters of the abomination, everything was gone. Several dozen giant trees turned into black obsidian pillars, and countless vines turned into fragile stone chains. The abomination easily broke free, and several hundred gnomes did not have time to retreat. Because they were hit by the energy wave, they instantly turned into black stone statues. Their actions of running for their lives and their expressions of shock and confusion were all frozen on their faces. Too terrifying. What kind of powerful death curse attack was this? It was at least 10 times stronger than what Samuel had released. Clark was filled with rage, but he also felt a trace of fear. Although they had several thousand people, the abomination's strength far surpassed their imaginations. If they kept fighting like this, most of them would die. Clark, I can feel your fear. The abomination gave a cold and sinister voice. After Green Bishop Lonnie's death, a trivial priest like you can't stop Green City's decline. I'll let you see what true strength is today. Clark angrily roared. If the bishop was still alive, how could he allow a fellow like you to be so arrogant? The abomination did not reply. Its body was covered in poison mist, and it released waves from inside out. Wherever it went, as long as it was covered in the waves, it would be covered in a layer of black, turning into a solid obsidian object. The gnomes did not dare block it. With the strength the abomination was showing, perhaps no one in Green City would dare block it. Then, I'll send you to see your beloved bishop. The abomination charged at Clark. Facing this wild energy, Clark's forehead was covered in a cold sweat. He could already smell the strong aura of death. This is bad. It was impossible to block this attack. Clark clearly understood that the Lich's strength was much stronger than the shaman high priest Mars. There were only 2 people in Green City that could deal with him in the past 100 years. One was the dying Bishop Lonnie, and the other was the druid prophet Yoda. The bishop was already dead. Yoda was not willing to make a move. The abomination charged at him with killing intent, and no one could stop it. At this critical moment, Chu Tian drew his sword. His target was not the abomination, but rather an altar in the undead temple. The abomination felt Chu Tian's movement, and its killing intent instantly increased by several times. With an angry roar, it let go of Clark and charged at Chu Tian. Too late. Chu Tian destroyed the altar with a single slash. The loathing's body that was halfway through immediately began to tremble as if it was convulsing. A low and calm voice sounded from its body. You can actually see through the source of my power. No matter how strong your divine sense or technique is, you can't control a puppet from this far away. As long as the connection is cut off, how will you be able to cause trouble? Human, I have indeed underestimated you. The abomination's large body suddenly inflated, but it's not over yet. The gnomes shouted in fear, "This is bad, it's going to explode." When the Lich's control over the abomination's body was forcefully stripped away, he actually activated the abomination's self-destruction ability. The abomination's energy was too strong, and if it exploded, the consequences would be unimaginable. You're not just looking down on me? Chu Tian's eyes released a green glow, and his hands condensed to power. This was a life energy that was even purer than the green religion's energy. Finally, it turned into a simple seal that slammed into the abomination's body. Life and death. The 2 powers fiercely confronted each other. The wildly expanding death energy in the abomination's body quickly slowed down. Chu Tian turned around and shouted, "Take advantage of this moment and leave this place." These gnomes were all experts of their race, and they instantly shot out like a rain of arrows. After around 5-6 seconds, with a large explosion sound, the Black Sea swallowed the surrounding several thousand meters. The ground and the air were all covered in a layer of obsidian-like matter. When Chu Tian took care of the abomination, what he needed to do next was to take care of the plague. The plague in Green City broke out without any warning, and around 40-50,000 people were affected. Most of them were gnomes, and most of them were young children or adults with low cultivations. They were a relatively weak group. These infected people all had blue and black bodies. Their limbs were weak, and most of them were unconscious. This was clearly not a normal disease. Most of the gnomes' cultivations weren't bad, so it was hard for a normal disease to have this kind of effect in a short period of time. Chu Tian had not just saved Clark's life. He had also saved the lives of several thousand gnome elites. No matter how much prejudice Clark had towards Chu Tian before, he was now completely convinced by Chu Tian. This human's abilities and talents far surpassed his imagination. He indeed had the qualifications to become Green City's city lord. Perhaps he had the ability to solve the problem of the plague. What is going on with the plague? So many people are infected at the same time. There must be a source of infection. Clark had not completely recovered from the feeling of escaping death, but he was not a normal person. So he had already calmed down. We've checked the food and drinking water, but we haven't found any signs of infection. There is no direct evidence that it is contagious, but the number of people infected is still increasing. We haven't found the cause even now. Chu Tian did not say anything. He began to check the patients. It was a little girl who was not even a meter tall. She was currently in a daze and had fallen into a coma. Her teeth were constantly grinding, making a ka-ka-ka sound. Under her originally white and tender skin, there were already blue and black veins visible. Her body temperature was very high. Her heart was beating very fast. Chu Tian placed his hand on his forehead and carefully sensed the situation in his body. Chu Tian's initial guess was correct. This was not a microorganism infection, but a kind of dark energy. After the dark energy seeped into a living being's body, it would gradually affect and transform the living being. This was the so-called demonic transformation reaction, but it was not completely demonic. It was just following a preset pattern, like a curse that slowly changed the biological form. Chu Tian took out a talisman paper and quickly drew a talisman array, gently placing it on the little girl's head. A gray and black aura immediately spread out from her body. Clark quickly asked when he saw this, "Can you find out what it is?" "This is the aura of a ghoul." Chu Tian judged. "I estimate that in around 2 days, if we can't purify the infected body, most of these infected people will turn into ghouls. This should be a premeditated plot." Clark was shocked. What? Turn into ghouls? Ghouls were semi-undead monsters that were directly transformed from living creatures. They had low intelligence, were easy to control, had extraordinary strength, and had a ferocious temperament. Necromancers, or cultivators who practice special cultivation methods, like to mass-produce these things. They were more powerful than skeleton soldiers and ordinary zombies. They were suitable for both hard labor and cannon fodder. Clark thought of the several tens of thousands of clansmen turning into ghouls and immediately felt an uncontrollable rage. These damn necromancers. Is there a way to cure her? "Sir Acting City Lord, you have to save my daughter. Sir Acting City Lord, please save my brother. Sir Acting City Lord." The gnomes all surrounded Chu Tian. Although the gnomes looked down on humans, even Great Elder Clark couldn't find out what was going on, but this human was able to easily figure it out. This meant that this human had a bit of skill. "Everyone listen to me." The gnomes all calmed down. Chu Tian explained to everyone, infecting so many people at once, the source of the contamination is not food or water. I suspect that the necromancers are arranging a large-scale array, want to pour a large amount of death energy into Green City. These weak people being infected early is just a sign. If my guesses aren't wrong, the large amount of energy is already in the air above Green City, and it can explode at any time. What? Could something else be happening? Chu Tian explained. The necromancers must be trying to pollute Green City into a land of the dead, turning all the living beings here into undead, making all the plants here rot, and making the soil forever be covered in death energy. This way, the eternal forest will not accept this land, and even the other powers will not accept this land. Green City will collapse on its own. Polluting an entire forest city? Was this really possible? A forest city was not like a place where humans lived. A forest city was this large, so how strong of an energy was needed to pollute it? Chu Tian didn't know how the Lich did this, but it seemed like this was the only explanation. After Chu Tian went into closed-door cultivation, he felt that Green City was covered in an indescribable strange atmosphere. Now, he could determine that this was a kind of energy and a power that could be controlled. There were not many changes to the plants in Green City, which meant that this energy was controlled by humans, actively polluting some of the weaker gnomes. Wanting to do this was not easy. First, one had to have a strong source of energy, and then one had to have high skills. This lich was not simple. He had some skills. This was no wonder. He had lived for 2,000 years after all. For a fellow to live for 2,000 years, his wisdom and knowledge was not something normal beings could compare to. No need to worry. I will quickly treat the people who have been polluted, but this is not a cure. Our priority right now is to find a mastermind behind the scenes. Only by killing that damn lich can we solve this problem. There was still hope. The gnomes excitedly cheered. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.